Okay.
We're
Oh, you guys are
Show on the
second.
road. Come on. All right, it's 5 o'clock.
somewhere.
Director Price,
Somewhere.
here. All right, are we ready?
It's like 5 cents.
Good to go?
6.
All right, it is 5:01. I'd like to call to order the Snoqualmie Valley School District Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. All right. Thank you. And Christy, all directors are present, as well as our student reps.
100%.
100% attendance. All right, moving on to the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is approval of the minutes of the January 9th, 2025 regular board meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain as I was not at the
Okay.
meeting.
All right, and the next is approval of the minutes of the January 13th, 2025 special meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And I need to abstain because I was unable to call into that one. All right, next is communications and recognition.
All right. I'd like to invite Mr. Robert Fletcher up from the Washington State School Retirees Association Unit 16, East King Unit, and he has a donation for Timber Ridge
Awesome.
Elementary School.
First, I'd like to say the Washington State School Retirees Association does this. This is what we do. Protect, support, and improve pensions and benefits for current and retired school employees. And there are some people that like that. There are 6 school districts in our area: Bellevue, Issaquah, Lake Washington, Mercer Island, Riverview, and Snoqualmie Valley. We offer in-grants and we lobby the legislature for pensions and benefits. In one school district a year, we choose to offer mid-year $1,000 for supplies for midwinter, and perhaps if voting is needed for that. And we are giving $1,000 to Timber Ridge.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have teachers in the Snoqualmie Valley School District gain grants, mini grants. Oh, it's I've been here before. To the school in a couple of weeks. Perhaps we could help.
Picture or
Yep.
something. Yep.
Okay,
Awesome.
so thank you, and I'm gonna head out.
Things to do.
Things
Appreciate it.
to do.
Thank you. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Hard to follow that one, but we're going to give it a shot. Thank you, Robert. So as we talked about last meeting, it is School Board Appreciation Month, and I actually have the first proclamation written by our new governor, Governor Ferguson. So I'll go ahead and read that proclamation. Whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to ensure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible members of a democratic society, enjoy productive and satisfying lives. And whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school board of directors and 9 elected educational service district board are the core of the public education and governance system in our state. And whereas the districts and regions they lead serve more than 1.1 million students, have a combined annual budget of over $20 billion and employ approximately 125,345 people. And whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the residents in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and ESDs provide a passionate voice for advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize school district board of directors as outstanding public servants and champions for public education. Now therefore, I, Bob Ferguson, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 25th as School Board Recognition Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me. So that's from our new governor, and congratulations to all of you. We do have a couple of gifts also that we promised last time that are here now, and Connor's going to come on up and do some modeling for us. And some,
They keep coming,
All right.
keep coming.
I initially wanted to get my hazards what Dan said, hey, let's steal it back. So he chose these ones. If you like it, it's also my idea.
Ooh.
We got some
Wow.
new era quarters that you guys branded, so we're very proud of the district, and you know, you guys can show up the logo and the brand of our district. So we have these available to you. I'll have them after we're done for the board work session. You grab your size. We have tons of exercises in there. Then what is it? If you like the way one looks better, just grab it. And if you don't have enough,
That's nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
you like it, you pick one. If you don't, we got this for our rounds of meetings, and we have a collection for you guys. So looking for appreciation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
It's very nice.
And that's all. Let me make sure. I didn't miss anybody.
Yeah, of course. I'm proud of it.
Yes, and that's all of the recognition for today.
Okay, moving on, we do not have any public comment tonight. No one signed up to speak here in person, and we did not get any emails. Moving on to the consent agenda, as is our practice, we would like to recognize the gifts to the district, and we have one tonight. The donation recipient is Cascade View Elementary, and it's a donation of $11,000 for Smart with Art. And that is from Cascade View Elementary School PTSA. So thank you, PTSA, for that very generous donation. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously.
All right, moving on to information we have, the ASB president, Drew. Drew, can you pronounce your last name correctly for me? Krejci.
Great.
Drew, invite you on up. Thanks for being here this evening.
Just make sure the microphone is on so that people can hear you if they're watching on YouTube. Sounds so exciting.
Well, before I begin, I just want to say thank you for all your work. You really do make the school and the district a better place. So I'm really glad that I could live here and be a part of it. So yeah, my name's Drew. I'm the president at ASB, or the ASB president here at Mount Si, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what that means. So recently ASB has undergone some change. Instead of being a selective class of only 35 students, we have now opened it up to 5 periods containing around 200 students. So this is a much bigger deal. We have 2 teachers or advisors teaching the class. So that means we've really reframed a lot of things. So we've gotten rid of like committees. So there's like, for example, there was student activity committee last year. We've completely gotten rid of that. We just have classes. And in the classes, it's like based around a curriculum. So I have Bartel, John Bartel. Other classes have Tani. That's what we call him. And they'll teach from a curriculum and like from their experience and a lot about leadership values and what it means to be a leader and how we could apply that within our school. So a lot of lessons there. And then I'll go more into this later, but pretty much everyone in the class is given a chance to work on a project that they like or like they find inspiration from. Um, and then also, since we have grown drastically, there's a much larger variety of students, so we've gotten more input. And I would like to say that we like have responded to the needs of a larger um, population because of that. And then also we kind of worked around, instead of just planning strictly big events, we've also done like all the little things leading up to that. So I'll give you an example of that right here. This was a calendar from our homecoming week. All the periods kind of broke off into their groups and we just had full reign to do whatever we wanted to, like make this week leading up to homecoming like an epic week, like something no one would forget. So like one of the standout ones to me was like dance team flash mob. So like we put a speaker in the hall and then dance team. So we worked with dance team and they did like this whole choreographed dance. Just in the middle, it was like a random Friday. And it was pretty epic. So there's just like a lot of little things like that. Students can pick what they want to do and then learn the skills to achieve that. So just a few examples of what I'm working on right now. We have the second semester PEP assembly coming up next week, a week from today actually. And this was actually really interesting because we have so many students over different periods. We've split up the assembly into 8-minute increments, and each period is given 8 minutes to plan their assembly. So a lot of communication on that front, but it's super cool where everyone gets a part in planning this assembly. And so like that means introduction to like new things that a lot of the students haven't seen before, and just like a lot of cool new ideas that like a smaller class would never have thought of just because there's so many new great minds that we can hear from. Another thing we're working on is the executive board elections. So though we've already started those, Henry has been a great help this past few weeks. We've run into a few roadblocks, but a little somber knowing that I'm already passing on the next role, but it's exciting to see all this. And then one more thing that we're working on is the Nick of Time heart screening. We're just kind of helping advertise that, trying to get as many students. We kind of have a joke in our class where we're trying to beat Bothell. So like we're really making this like a competition. I think they had 800 signups, something, 800. So we just want to beat that, and I think we're on track for that.
Yeah, I think we're already beating them.
Did
We
we?
already did beat 'em?
Really? That's
I'm not a-
amazing.
I'm not 100% on that,
Nice.
but
Fantastic.
it's cool.
Cool. Wow.
Okay, and then another thing that I do is student senate meetings. So it's pretty much very similar to this. It's actually in the library too, so like right over where you guys are sitting is where I'll be speaking specifically. So we have club board members, sport team captains, and class representatives from each LA class of all the grades try and show up, and I'll just kind of give them a slideshow, almost very similar to this one, where I'll just tell them everything that's going on within ASB, what they need to know, like any important announcements, and like upcoming events to be aware of so that they could tell their peers, because the people at these meetings should have some influence over them so they can relay that on to others around them. And then as Henry is our treasurer, he can speak on it. He works really hard on making the finances to approve. So we have to get the finances approved by the Senate. So we present them to the Senate, Henry walks them through it, and then we pass it, the vote. So far we're unanimous every time. So we're at perfect record. And then following that, I'll meet with admin the week after, just during first period, and just kind of discuss almost everything I talk about with Senate, just a little more in depth, and I'll ask for some advice from them, get their input, and just kind of like share information to see that we're thinking the same. So some more meetings is we meet exec board, that's once a week, so that's with the president, vice president, all those positions. That's when we'll kind of like discuss upcoming events, so like what we're gonna put on the students' Senate slideshow, so like what's something that the students need to know. We'll kind of work through that, lay a foundation for that. And then since it's early in the morning, I like to sometimes bring in donuts.
What time was that? No, he's gonna take our donuts.
What?
He's gonna take our donuts now.
Yeah, don't tell him. Don't tell him where it's at.
Or I'd bring a couple dozen.
Oh, wait, that works too.
And then another thing that I do as president is I'll meet with other presidents within our district and then also like other districts. So there's like a lot of different schools. There's like Tesla, something like that, ICS. So like just a large majority, like different types of people and like different school sizes, and we'll just kind of discuss how our year's going, what we're doing, and like bounce off ideas from each other about how we could like improve. And also it's just nice to have somebody to rely on if I'm ever like confused about something and I need some clarification, and I'll text the group chat, ask for their opinion. But yeah, and it's also like leading up to when you're elected, and like for the first few months, it was vital for me to have this resource just because they really helped me find my way, and it's just kind of like a tradition where we always pass it on. So yeah, that's another thing. And then just to talk to you about my experience with the change in class sizes, that means that I've got to work with so many people, and I've got to meet so many amazing people that I would have never met just ever before. So I've found just it amazing, all that. And then since it's like curriculum based, and our advisor is really experienced and knows what he's talking about, he's taught me personally a lot of lessons by example, and that I'll carry with me for a long time. And then like I'll try and apply that to the different projects that I'm learning, so that also something that I've learned is being able to have a task and pursue it with just fluidity, and doing multiple of those at a time too, just to make it a little bit harder. And then lastly is I've kind of got to like experience like learning, and it feels like a new light. Like most classes, it's been like do the homework, textbooks, listen to the teacher, but this one it's really like experience based, and like really get into it. But it's not like a typical like learn about it. You have to find out about it through experience, and the leadership program is a fantastic experience that just prepares many students. I think that's all I have for you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Oh, can I ask a quick question? Does each teacher have 5 classes, or is it 5 total?
It's 5 total.
5
so,
total, okay. So about 40 kids or students in each
Right.
class period. Okay. And this might be a question for the high school. Is there a sense that we have more students that want to be a part of it than we have room for? Or do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. We do expect for the class to grow next year, so I think we'll probably open it up to 7 periods,
Okay,
something like that.
wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah, we did rear that as something very for.
Great, because I just love the idea of more kids getting that opportunity.
It's usually so small.
Yeah, thank you.
And-
This was very interesting.
I have another question that's probably, I don't know if you can answer it, Angela can answer it. I know originally we were hoping that we could link this in with CTE and get it some type of a college and the high school credit with leadership. And we weren't sure. Were we able to do that? Okay. Yeah, I remember Bartel being, because I remember Bartel needing and Tani needing to be certified or whatever, I'm using the wrong terminology probably, but,
I think it's like business and project management. or
okay.
something.
But you can get college, you can get it, some type of CT credit or
Not 100%, but I remember reading something
some
about
type of dual credit. Okay,
it in like the course catalog. or
okay,
something.
cool, awesome. Cool.
And
Well,
so
ahead.
it is just in the course catalog and people sign up for it and they fill the classes that are available from that? Or are there other ways that people get placed in those classes?
Well, there's a few ways, but for me personally, since I was elected into um, an executive position, that meant that I automatically
Had to, yeah.
get placed into one.
Right.
Naturally. But yeah, it's just you sign up a year before, and there's no like previous requirements. So like that's another thing that changed was last year there was like trial like, an interview thing. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
interviewed, and then you got accepted into the class. But now that's gone. You just show up, and we're happy to take whoever.
Cool.
It's a new format from last year to this year. What were the things that really, not only learnings, but what benefited significantly? And, of course, as you go along, you're going to make little changes to the things that didn't work out. So can you share some of your observations?
Yeah, so last year was my first year in ASB, and that was extremely like regimented. Like everyone had their task. Everyone like each committee had their big like year-long task. But since that's gone, it's kind of just gone to whoever. So I think a benefit from that is just many different people can work on different things. So previous, like if you were in a committee, you would work only on that one thing, but now you can work on many different things. So like you're not strictly focusing on planning homecoming. You could help plan homecoming, and then you could also like
Doing
make
something.
Instagram posts or something like that. So there's like a lot more freedom within the program to kind of find what enjoys you,
Mhm.
what you enjoy.
Yes.
Awesome, great.
Cool.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. Guys.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
So
Good
much.
job.
Just a quick comment. I've had the chance to join the Senate last Friday, and we were invited to share about school finance. I thought it was pretty cool. That
That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how much, on a Friday afternoon they all took away, but the invite, having the
Yeah, that's wonderful.
students interested and invited to that was tough. So thank you.
And they chose the topic too?
Well, I don't know how they chose the topic. I'm gonna ask Henry and Drew that, but
Thank you, Drew.
It's impressive. Right. Do, 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 do.
all right, we have our student rep report. Heavy students tonight, just the way we like it.
Yep.
Yeah.
You guys must have had a lot of data in yours. I tried to go through to try and, it took a lot to download it because of all the awesome pictures you have in here.
Yeah, I really Connor shared something shared the folder. So I really going through it. I'll do it during 5 minutes. So my goal by the end of the year is to have photos from every folder somehow. Not everybody. Make sure some photos.
Representation.
Awesome.
Well, good evening. It's January.
It's January.
Crazy. Second semester is about to start. And I can't believe it, but I feel like we just started this year. This is our January student rep report. It's a little shorter this month than normal, but we still got some great things that we're excited to share. Drew kind of talked about leadership and kind of what leadership's doing, so we're gonna follow up some of what we've been going on. What we already kind of shared. Oh, my bad.
There you go. We could hear you. but it
I'm
was-
fired. All right. And then kind of for the rest of the report, we're gonna kind of talk about what we took away from the Mass Summit. And then our Grayson's meeting with Twin Falls ASB yesterday morning. And then kind of our future plans going into the near kind of rest of the year. So I'm going to start out with kind of what's going on in Mount Si. The two kind of main things is we had an MLK assembly, and then we also had our student focus group a couple weeks ago. So the MLK assembly was as some students have shared, it was one of the best assemblies they've ever been a part of. We had Christian Page come and speak, and he did a phenomenal job. His message on kind of not only just like unconditional love, but also the need to and shared responsibility to look out for those around you, I think was really powerful, and really tied well into MLK and what the work he's done. Um, and I think, I mean, as I said earlier, students have already been kind of trying to implement what he's been saying to them, and kind of trying to push it on beyond just one assembly and into what they're doing. And kind of going into this deeper, we had 100 students were kind of given the opportunity to work with Christian Page all day on building a culture and climate of just unconditional love, positivity at Mount Si. One of the main things that these students did is they made posters kind of talking about what they want Mount Si to look like. And those posters got put around all over the library for all of the staff and to come and walk around and kind of so they could see how the students feel, so they could go and kind of work to make change not only for the students but for their fellow staff members, which I think it's really awesome that Christian Page not only was able to kind of help the students and facilitate an environment for them to see what they want and how they can make it better, but then have the teachers kind of see that work and work with them as well to make that happen, which I think not only was a positive experience for those 100 people, but also his work in words in the assembly were powerful for everyone.
I have a couple questions. How did the 100 students get chosen? And did you guys choose him? Because I heard also really, really good things.
Mhm.
Or did the administration help you find him?
I think I'm not sure how he got chosen. I'm assuming it was the administration as well as the leadership teachers. And then I'm not sure how the 100 students
Okay.
got chosen. I'm assuming it's club leadership, sports captains, and then kind of just students who were nominated. I knew they wanted to definitely have a focus on younger students though, so they could continue the work as they progressed.
And Christian Page also had come to the school before COVID. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that's what he mentioned. So I think that he wanted to come back and then end up doing this like little summit thing
Yep.
in the library. So yeah.
Cool.
And I believe that Ms. Hay and the admin reached out to teachers and asked for that
recommendations.
broad
Okay.
perspective of
Good.
students and for recommendation. And then kind of a personal invite was kind of brought to the table to get those students.
Very
But when I was here, it was definitely an array of interests and whatnot from the perspective of the students.
And there was no distraction of poppets for
There
those
was
of you
no
that were there.
distraction of pop. That was a great idea, Henry.
Thank you, thank you. And so kind of going to the student focus group, we've talked about this a couple times, but this time was a little different. We kind of had umbrella words and terms, kind of and with one word responses, which kind of led into a discussion. And kind of three of those words were lunch, passing periods, and after school. So passing periods and lunch can feel definitely overcrowded, which I mean is something that there's no getting around at a school like Mount Si. And honestly, I think there's a lot of mixed feelings definitely from the students, as it's great to be able to see your friends in the hallways, as well as getting from class to class is of course definitely a challenge, which I think is also tactical by administration to make sure students are working to get where they're supposed to be. And I mean, a lot of students feel that passing periods are too short, but I think it's also tactical to make students get to where they need to go and not being like, oh, hey, I'm in the wrong building because I was talking to my friend. So maybe there is a little strategy behind that, but I'm not gonna, unleash any secrets on that. And then kind of going more into the food aspect of that, lines are definitely very long, as there is a lot of students who are trying to order lunch. These lines are about, I think, 10 minutes long. And so if you're not in line right away, there's definitely a wait, and you'll miss out on some of that valuable lunchtime. And also there has been a couple instances of running out of food. That's more on the popular food days. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of factors into that, but students are definitely vocalizing that, especially the long lunch lines. which is kind of
So
just,
maybe we should consider some robotic automation systems kind of thing.
I mean, with all this AI work, there could definitely be some investments in that. ChatGPT, maybe they'll launch a food service, who knows? Um,
Hope Riley's probably listening to me.
yeah,
on my phone.
I think this is just something we should keep an eye on. Yeah, I'll keep reading on OpenAI and see what they're doing with that. But yeah. But overall, there's a lot more positives kind of going around lunch and passing periods. I mean, the fact that there are so many different places to sit at lunch. I mean, right outside here on a sunny day, you can sit, take in the mountain, get that fresh air. There's just, I mean, it's dark, so I can't really have the mountain there, but I mean, it's beautiful. I think that's something that students love, and we're kind of just blessed to have such an amazing campus like this. And also students, again, talked about the variety of activities after school, whether that's your clubs and sports. They're very blessed and feel and have been vocalizing how awesome it is to have all those opportunities. And then also how much variety there is with lunch is something that's also awesome as well. I think that more of the options that have more variety, like the sandwich line or the nacho bar, are definitely where those lines get long. But students are still happy to have those because it's not the same, pizza that you think of when you get school lunch. It's a little better. And then it's also the parking lots are great. Of course, there's a little line, but overall, having multiple entrances to some of the different parking lots makes it easy for students to get in and out pretty easily. And then also there is just kind of this weird community dynamic that students are feeling. They feel like community is overall just like separated at different points, and which could definitely be due to just having 2,000 kids in a school, but also people come together when they need to, whether it's events like homecoming or during our winter wonderland. Students can really get connected, which is I think something that we're really working on with leadership and trying to create an environment that feels together the whole time rather than coming together at certain points. And I mean, this also kind of ties into having a big school, but friend groups are more rigid, where you see your friend group, you kind of only interact with your friend group, which is kind of also having the variety of seating arrangements, big school, big campus. And going more into the values and just not really feeling intertwined. But hopefully over the next few years with the development of the leadership program, we'll see some change along that, as well as some of the work that people are taking away from Christian Page. Hopefully we'll begin to making those positive differences.
Awesome.
And then kind of going into more ownership and awareness and connection support, more kind of revolving around staff. A lot of students feel scared to ask for help, which of course is a very valid thing, as whether you're just embarrassed for being wrong, or feel like asking for help is just something too hard to ask. Even though there's a lot of help available, all teachers have office hours. However, not having them kind of standardized between the teachers makes it a little more difficult for students to kind of understand whether the teachers are making it clear or not. And then also counselors have been starting to become a problem, with just kind of overall how many students are looking for support, and only having, I think it's 6 counselors or 5 in our building. Getting a meeting is very difficult. And having, for counselors to put full attention on one student there are 500, it's pretty difficult. And then advisors for clubs are also need to have a little more support, is what the students are kind of asking for and feeling. This is kind of hard with having so many clubs at Mount Si, that it starts to get difficult, and especially right now when we can't really ask for any more clubs because of how many we have. And thanks to the financial report, I think the students are kind of understanding why everything is so tight. But it's just another kind of issue all brought up by funding.
Sorry, Henry, when you say advisors need to be supported more, are you talking about the teachers or the student?
So
What does that mean?
I think that's from the feedback we're getting, it's the club advisors. So advisors who are staying after and kind of running clubs. And I think they mean more like, I think when students have been saying that, they mean like financially.
Okay.
But I think that's kind of like right now we're at the compromise. And so I think it's just another thing that students really don't fully understand. But we'll keep trying to get a more clear answer from that, and maybe even working with some advisors to see how can we facilitate and kind of that support that they need.
Okay, now into the Math Summit. I think most of you guys were there, and with this, we really just like want to say like summarize like what we've gotten from it, like good, and then like where we need to improve, and then also just like talk about like the importance of like trying to like do more stuff like this, because it was great that we did this and got like initial feedback, and I think the only way to actually make a change is to go back and do more and reassess. So, what's going well? First of all, AP and SAT scores were really great. I mean, like the math AP scores, like with pre-calculus, like 100% passing, like that is fantastic. SBA scores are also getting back to pre-COVID levels, which is also great because they took a dip for quite a while. Tier one instruction through like group work, direct instruction, and reciprocal teaching were things that a lot of people mentioned and noticed were going really well with tier one instruction. At tier two, there's office hours for pretty much everyone. I think every teacher has office hours. There's online tutoring and help with Math Nation through Algebra 2. And then also talking about like the grading systems, the 70/30 and 90/10 grading categories are working at their levels, and that they're benefiting both the middle school students with the 70/30 and the high school students at the 90/10. And then also our pathways are allowing for every student to have a pathway that's fit for them, which is really important. So then everyone has success in their math pathways and make sure that they can learn.
Grayson, did you talk to fellow students about people in middle school that take algebra and get the 70/30 versus high school that get the 90/10?
Yeah, so actually I was at my friend's house the other day who has a middle schooler, and I asked them about this, and one thing that they did say was that they were scared to go to high school and have it be the 90/10. So it's like more about how you can like maybe adapt these middle school students more to that 90/10 grading category before they actually get there, because that's definitely a huge jump with not only it being 90% assessments but also them dropping homework out of the equation. So it's really about just like informing these middle schoolers like how they can like best prepare for this. Okay. And now onto like where we can improve. I think finding ways for geometry level sophomores to be able to perform on the SBA. I think that we're doing well on it, and admin's working to get more procedures in to help these sophomores, but just making sure that they feel like they're set up for success in this, because they are missing the algebra 2 while they're taking this test, which is something that they do assess on. And then another part is for assessments, having feedback given on time before the next assessment when we consider retakes, because there's been a lot of problems with tests being given back maybe like a day before, and really hard to study what you just missed when you're going to get in the class the next day without questions and kind of have to redo it. So it's about how can we make like a timeline and schedule for these teachers to follow, so then every student can get feedback and to be able to ask questions when they need to. And then bringing more practice problems into review for tests that are more like word problems, to give students like more of an understanding what's going to be on the test. Totally understand that tests shouldn't be the exact thing of the review guide. It's all about the application. But I think doing some word problems and some more application problems could actually benefit the students in making sure that they feel ready for the test, instead of getting there and being like, shoot, I didn't know how to apply a function right. So something like that. And then finally, finding a universal program to help Common Core pre-calc and calculus students online, like Math Nation, because there's a gap for those students. So obviously, people through Algebra 2 have Math Nation, and then any AP student has College Board for that help online. However, a lot of pre-calc and calculus students are saying that they don't have a lot of support online and really have to rely on their teacher or get a tutor to be able to fill that gap, to make sure that they actually understand the content. So something like that could be really important to look at to see how we can help them best at like in homes. Okay, now
That was a
Twin Falls.
great summary of what's working and what's not working, because it was very, I mean, literally, these are actionable.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing.
Okay, so now to Twin Falls. Henry couldn't go with me, but I went yesterday morning and met with the 8th graders.
Called you out.
Call out. But I met with the 8th grade board for Twin Falls ASB. They actually have, I would probably say, like 20 students involved in their leadership program right now and are trying to emulate what we do at Mount Si. But I met with probably 8th grade students, and then of course their teacher, Miss Donner, who is a counselor at Twin Falls, and the meeting went really great. So we have to start off with a phone policy, obviously, because that's what kids love to talk about. So I asked them how they would rate it. They said about a 3. I think it was a little bit lower than that. I rounded up just for um and really what they said about it was students just don't like it because they can't have it on them. It has to be in lockers at all times. So they can't even have it during passing periods, which they don't enjoy. However, they did say that helps them focus in class and that they felt like they're doing a lot more work in class instead of like playing games on their phone or texting people, things like that. Again, they want it during passing period. And then also something that was brought up is that on their lockers, their locker combinations don't switch. So if there's someone that had your locker in the previous year, they could very well get into your locker, and there's been problems with people stealing stuff out of people's lockers because of that. So there's been some people that have been afraid that they're going to take their phone or other valuables that they keep within their lockers. And then also hard to contact parents, and a lot of people voice this when it comes to sports and after school activities, is that they couldn't know what their parents were saying or text their parents about rides, things like that, or schedule changes until after school, which they had a hard time with, especially just considering the fact that it's kind of a lot harder for middle school students to get around because they obviously can't drive. Okay, and then I also asked about tech-free lunches like Chief Canum has on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They didn't really like the idea of it. Um, Many students don't use their phones already during lunch, and they said there's many options for them, which I'll get to later, for them to do during lunch, and they find that they just don't use them, and it's really just a break time. Um, and with having no tech lunches, it means no computers at lunch either. And a lot of people said that they would want to be able to do homework because sometimes that's their last place to catch up or study for tests before they go into class. And then they also want to be able to have the break if necessary to be on their phones, and then also talk to their parents about after school logistics. Okay. Now moving on to just like things that they're doing right now, ASB, just the whole school and whatnot. So first they hold ASB lunch activities. There's this one Oreo game thing where you like put one on your face and they said like you try to move it down to your mouth. Things like that they do during lunch to try to get kids to do more like activities. They also do something called Raven rallies, which are pep assemblies and highlight students, athletes, and other club members and also teachers. And they play a lot of games, and it's just like our pep assemblies here at Mount Si. They also have a swag store, which you can see, it's the bottom picture, and I got to go look at it, and it was actually really cool. They sell school supplies, like more fun, colorful stuff, food, merch, and things like that, and you could buy it with swag bucks that you get for good behavior at school. And then they also have the Raven Stick, which is awarded every quarter to a class for good behavior, and it usually comes with cotton candy as its prize for the grade, which is cool. And usually the Raven Stick is like held above their hallway because every like class kind of has their own area. And then they're also planning a Palentine's Day dance. That's hard to say. But there's also 2 other ones in the year. That's more of an ASB event specifically. And then they're also doing a Kindness Spirit Week this week to celebrate kindness. And they're wearing, I'm pretty sure, orange to like celebrate that. And then they also do 3 to 4 other Spirit Weeks in the year or Spirit Days. Okay, so some areas of growth. They were talking about getting a new water fountain at the lunchroom because apparently right now there is none, which is a huge issue with that. And a lot of kids, hallways are closed off during that time. A lot of kids want to be able to go get water if they don't bring water bottles to school or to be able to fill up their water bottle. And currently they don't have the option and have to do it during passing periods. They also want to gather more student opinion, and we are going to try to do a survey with them like we did at SMS. So we've been sending them like material that we use for the high school and at SMS, so then we can combine and make a survey together and they can get information and we can as well to be able to present to you guys. And then a lot of kids said that the passing periods were too short as they can't get from class to class and also into their locker efficiently. This was kind of the same thing with SMS where they switched the timing to be able to help all these students out because a lot of students found that like if they had PE and then a class, they would have to go to PE, change, go to their locker and then to the classroom. And a lot of the times they ended up being late. And right now it's kind of up to the teacher on whether or not they're okay with some students being a little bit tardy because of them having a class schedule on opposite sides of the school. But a lot of kids said they are working with their teachers right now, but it would be beneficial for everyone to kind of have maybe an extra minute or something to grab their stuff. Okay. And then what is like going great like overall at Twin Falls? So a lot of people said there's a great community with kind students and everyone seems to know each other, which they all really enjoyed. And a lot of them have gone to school with each other since they were really little, which is kind of something like everywhere in the valley. There's many after school activities that they appreciated, 7 different sports. They also have like a whole list of clubs with D&D club being their biggest with like I think 45 members, which is great. And then there's also some smaller clubs, but they kind of disappear throughout the year with like funding, things like that. Principals, teachers, and counselors are also very involved, and a lot of the students really like that they go out during their lunch periods to go talk to them, hang out with them, socialize. So they felt like their teachers and principals, things like that, really knew who they were, which they appreciated. And then also the options during lunch to play games in the library, in the gym, or outside, depending on whether or not it's raining, which they really enjoyed too, because they felt like it was kind of like a little mini recess. And the sixth graders I asked at the very end when they came in said that they really liked the transition. Like they felt like recess wasn't completely taken away. And they said when they were in fifth grade, it was like they felt like they were doomed. But I felt like that was super nice. And now on to future plans.
Awesome. Well, kind of going into our more near future, we're really trying to put a focus on getting into Two Rivers, as well as working with the Parent Partnership Program to kind of get student voice, especially from these students who are more underrepresented, especially kind of being disconnected from Mount Si and their own programs, and still trying to be able to find ways to provide voice to those students. So we're working on a few key different things. Mainly talking about Two Rivers, we're planning on creating student focus groups. The good part of having Two Rivers kind of still built in interconnected to an extent with Mount Si is that they share a very similar schedule, including advisory. So we can take that advisory period and meet with a smaller group of students where we can ask them questions just like a focus group and kind of mimic what we're doing at the high school level with kind of the bigger group of students. This is just a great way to kind of build it into our day and a very easy way to get student voice. Another aspect is that Two Rivers has a president and vice president who we were just connected with recently. And being able to kind of work with them to maybe either get student voice through us or kind of have them take a step towards advocating not only for themselves but others, maybe even presenting at a board meeting where they can kind of we can really work with them to kind of grow the student voice of Two Rivers and really make sure that their voice is known and advocated for. And then we're also hoping to collaborate on the Two Rivers semester survey that they do, kind of putting some questions that we have into there so we at least just starting off have some data that we can kind of work for and kind of start with, which is kind of a good starting point before we get into our focus groups. And P3 is a little more of a challenge because they don't all have classes, especially with the 11th and 12th grade students who are fully online. So there's kind of a few ways we're going to go around this. One of them is the idea of having Zoom calls. Since they're online, they're already on their computers a lot. So it shouldn't, as long as we can find ways to make that time work, we'll be able to connect with them online. Also, there is locations where P3 where they meet weekly. One of them I think is at SMS or SES, and then another one is up at the apartments up on the ridge. And so maybe going and meeting with the P3 students at one of those locations, being able to do a focus group or ask them some questions and connect with them and see how can we advocate for them better? What do they need? How are they feeling? That might be a good way to kind of maybe not make them go out of their way. So we're really trying to go out towards them. Also, there's a P3 leadership class where they meet. I'm not sure how often. It might be once a week or somewhat regularly, where we're going to be able to go in and kind of meet with the teacher and all the leadership students and really connect and get that kind of unique perspective of leadership in a alternative kind of online learning atmosphere, which is going to be great. And again, these students are kind of misunderstood, especially from a student perspective, as it's very kind of not all students know what it's like to not go to whether it's Two Rivers or P3. So maybe not only can we express this voice to you as the board and bring that student perspective, but also sharing that to other students in the Valley so they can see kind of what that's like, and maybe it could be a good fit for them. So yeah, awesome.
One quick question, back to the Mount Si survey that you guys presented on. Do you remember how many students that was?
That was 125.
Okay.
And we want to put one out this semester for sure and we realized what we need to do better at to get more people. So we're gonna definitely do one this semester and hopefully increase the number. And then we're sending that same survey format to Twin Falls so then they can take that and take the questions and edit them a little bit to fit middle schoolers. And then hopefully we can also take some of the data from that as well.
Thank you.
I just have to, I think we all reiterated this with the SMS feedback as well, but we have stellar student reps, we always do, and they've all talked about, we want to get feedback from middle school, and it's never happened. So, I mean, it's never tangibly happened. So the fact you've been able to do it for 2 of them already is awesome. And it's good to the point, it's actionable as well. And so good job. Even though you didn't go ahead, she still.
I'll just
You're
leave
after
that.
supporting, I'm sure you helped her with the deck.
I love that we have student reps that can talk about tier 1
Oh,
and
totally.
tier 2 interventions.
I'm
I'll
just going
have
to say
to
that. Oh, sorry.
echo what Director Johnson said. It's not like growing a coalition, but it's more than just a section of student voice. You're trying to get all the student voice, and that's quite a powerful
cool.
thing. So awesome.
Great job.
Gary said way better than I did. So yeah.
I'm just going to close with this.
Yeah,
Student rep.
Yes.
Student rep.
Awesome.
So Grayson can't throw me under the bus.
Excellent
All
job.
right, thank you
as
guys.
always.
Yay.
Good job, good job.
All right, we'll invite Director Zier, Executive Director Zier and Executive Director Heimbigner up. Another touch on our strategic plan.
All right. So we're here to talk about goal 2 of the strategic plan. We're going to go, and the 4 major components within that goal, as you know, are MTSS, UDL, the vertical alignment and transitions from our, preschool to K, 5 to 6, and 8 to 9, and then parent and family engagement. Thank you. I always remember that, we're going to talk a little bit about each of these, just kind of like the overview of what they are, and then what we're doing so far, kind of where our baseline's at, and then our immediate next steps. I know that you're a very educated board, and our student reps, as you pointed out, so lovely, already know tier 1 and tier 2, but I always remember that these presentations are also for the public that are tuning in. So I know that you know a lot of this stuff. So for MTSS, just as a reminder, that's the multi-tiered systems of support where you have a lot of people use the graphic of a triangle. I added the diamond as well, just because it's also helpful to think a lot of people incorporate the right side of that diamond within their tier 1 when they're talking about it, but it's never as nicely called out from the triangle model. So I included a few visuals there, but as a reminder, tier 1 is that thing that everybody gets. It's just the basic instruction. So we define what we really want to happen for all of our students for both academics and social, emotional, and behavior. So all of our students are getting that. And then tier 2 is where it's a targeted group of students who might need a little bit more support. And then tier 3 is same, but maybe more intensive supports. It's important just to note that we view this as an integrated model. So we always talk about behavior and academics together, because as you know, a student's behavior might need some tier 2 support, but that might be because because their academics are so high that they're not being challenged enough academically with rigor. And so that causes sort of tier 2 behavior intervention. So it's important to talk about them always together and integrated and not as separate things, even though interventions might be matched separately for those things. But as you can see with the diamond, the difference really is it's also within that tier, it's about expanding for some of those highly capable challenged students who need that rigor and challenge beyond what they're getting in tier 1, which isn't necessarily like an intervention, tier 2 intervention, as sometimes people in the triangle particularly say, which is always students who are maybe not meeting benchmark. It's not that. So it can kind of be both.
Okay. And this is really just a reminder of what those elements are and the things that we're working towards. And it's always rooted in those best practices that are research based. So the main elements of UDL, MTSS, I'm on 3 slides ahead of me, really have to do with our practices that we're already doing here. Now, there are areas that can improve and grow, absolutely. But the systems that we've built and that we continue to build are rooted in these 4 things. So always using data to guide those decisions, having measurable outcomes. So that starts with defining very clear, measurable goals. And I know as a board, you've talked about that a lot. Like, we have these things. How are we going to know how we're doing towards it? Making sure that we're implementing methods and things that are research-based. That isn't something that we're just going to try something because it sounds good, but it's something that has sound practice behind it. And then making sure that we create those systems and have supports in place within our implementation, but also within our classrooms and in all those structures to really support that model across the board to meet the needs of all kids.
So I'll first chat about data for decision making. So for tier 1, our schools are looking at data, and you'll see in our next steps we could be more consistent about what data and how frequently. But our schools all have MTSS teams that are looking at data, and from a tier 1 lens, that's things maybe like Swiss data for looking at behavior, and then like STAR and Acadians data that we bring to the board for our SIP presentation. So they're looking at that to look at sort of how are we doing with tier 1. That might include some of our screeners like SABRS, our new social emotional screener, and things like that. And then formative assessments. So some teachers will also bring some of their classroom-based assessments to those MTSS meetings when there's a student they want to talk about for tier 2, but also from a tier 1 perspective. And then tier 2, the data is really similar. We're using some of that. You use some of the same sets of data, right, for tier 1 and tier 2. So for tier 1, you're looking at more for like bigger patterns of maybe like the target data we look at for SBA of like, okay, our students really need to work on inference. I know we talk about that a lot, right? So that's a tier 1, looking at the same set of data. And then you might look at that exact same data to say, okay, these particular groups of students need some extra help because they're below benchmark. And then they'll use that to intervention match students for, depending on what the data set they're looking at. It might be attendance data, right? And then they're gonna have an intervention targeted towards attendance. But data is at the root of each of those things, and all of our MTSS teams are using data regularly to, from a tier 1 and a tier 2 perspective.
Okay. And going back to those elements, measurable outcomes is the second one of a clearly defined kind of strong MTSS system. And within this, it's really making sure, as I mentioned before, we have those clear measurable outcomes. And that's hard because they're not always there. And that's one thing I would say over the last few years in all levels K-12, we've really worked to ensure we have those common practices. We have common assessments. We have ways for kids to demonstrate that, not just in one opportunity, but to take retakes and different things like that. So being sure as a system that we know what it is that we're looking for our students. So just jumping down to the academics, really looking at those grade level benchmarks, right? Making sure it's based on a standard, that we're aligned across our practices, not only as a particular team or a content team, but also kind of in that K-12 system, which something like through the Math Summits and things that we're talking about, working with our teachers, we're starting to see the need for increased that vertical alignment, not just between like high school, 9th, 10th grade, but really looking at it between elementary, middle school, and high school. As it connects to behavior specifically, I think this is one PBIS. It feels like it's been around for a long time, right? And really setting those school-wide behavior goals, and everyone has some really strong systems in place about that. But it's going back to what those measurable outcomes are that kids buy into also, right? So it isn't something where we just feel like, oh, this is what we should be doing, but we're getting input and feedback around that and what's working in those universal kind of, what benefits some is good for all, or the other way around. Looking at those tier 2, tier 3 practices in measurable outcomes, again, we kind of keep just repeating ourselves. It's being really clear on what the goal is and making sure something you can measurable with something that's tangible and it's something that everybody knows about. It's not a secret. Looking at really those individual behavior goals, what works for, Grayson may not work for Henry or vice versa, right? So making sure that we're really individualizing what we're doing with our kids to meet their needs. Progress monitoring tools, and then when it comes to academics, very similar, making sure that the interventions are aligned with the students. So whether they need that remediation, whether they need just the reinforcement or they need enrichment, that what we're doing within our practices are meeting the needs of all kids, and then just regularly evaluating those outcomes. It's not enough just to be like, one and done, here we go, but to using the plans that we've put in place and those measures to ensure that students are succeeding.
Quick question.
Yes.
What percentage of our students are in tier 2 and 3?
It depends on which area,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, roughly when you look at it, you want to make sure that like those tier 2 interventions, like you go back to your triangle, are not more than say 20% of your kids. So like right now, I can speak specifically to Win Reading because that is one that we know we've invested a lot of time at that tier 2 level.
Right.
And I think when we first started, before all of our curriculums were aligned and all the program that we've done, so like 10 years ago, that number was up closer towards that 40%, and now we're definitely more to what that research-based hope would be up to 20%. So I think that's another place that shows when you get all the systems in line and you have those measurable outcomes and you have all the best practices in place, then over time you start seeing to where the goal and the hope would be. But I think again, it just depends on different programs, different measures, different pieces to it.
Since we have the MTSS for the whole K through 12, is there any pattern that you see from elementary to middle to high? Because if we are getting supported through the elementary, then they may not need that kind of support system as they grow along. Do you see those patterns?
So yes, and I would say that over the last probably 6 years, we've really started developing those programs in our elementary school. And it's the same as we've shared our multilingual pieces, right? We've really started increasing over the last 6 years the funding, the curriculum, the programming, research-based, the education, everything around it, and really targeting at the elementary school than it is. So we're seeing now from 5th grade to 6th grade the results in our literacy numbers, our ML numbers. To your point, yes, we're seeing the impact. But for the high school kids that didn't have that because we really got robust 6 years ago, you can kind of see the differential in there. But that's our hope with everything that we've put in place and how much effort we've put in emphasis at those primary grades. I think I shared in the report last week, but we got our preliminary Acadience results. And over the last 3 years, since we brought in letters and the new curriculums, every single year we've gone up exponentially to the point now when we look at the cohort data, it's proving your point. It's doing exactly what you would hope it would do. So I'm expecting really good things to keep progressing from that. But you have to start somewhere. So
Yep. No, I understand this.
Yeah,
Some of this
it's
data we
great.
have seen, but again, I wanted it repeated for overall general awareness.
And to that point, all of that really having clear defined goals and then those measurable outcomes. And when you look back at those elements of practice, everything's aligned. It's not just something like, oh, just at tier 1. It has to have that through line. And so as we're starting to implement, we are seeing the success that research would tell us we should see. We are. So something to celebrate.
Along that exact same line, are we front loading all the way to kindergarten? I know we do preschool, kindergarten first, so that even by 5th grade, we're seeing quite a bit of difference.
Can you reframe?
Investing in earlier, but really all the way to the beginning.
Oh, you mean like our preschool? We definitely are. We've aligned our letters practice with our preschool, and we're doing more outreach now with community preschools that we have. They don't all, they know of our curriculums, but they, I don't know that they all use our curriculums. They're private preschools, but our preschool does. And they're getting the letters training and doing the same thing. So really working through what we can control robustly, and then opening the doors and the partnerships with the community preschools so they know what it means to be a kindergartner
Like, someone had shared the other day that a preschool was sharing with their family, oh, right now we have to, the kids have to be able to bundle their lunches and they can only eat for 5 minutes and all these misconceptions. And so it's really making sure that they know the truth. No, kids have they have 20 minutes to eat and they're not shushed out the door in 20 minutes. So just making sure that they know and they have all the conceptions of what it means to be a student.
I think Monica already touched a little bit on this, but it's so nice that even the questions are so much overlap, right? Because that hits on the vertical transition, like the vertical alignment and the transitions, right? And so, which is exactly that. These are all integrated. For evidence-based practice, you've seen this a lot, like Mass Summit, our grading work study. We talked about like what do we know are evidence-based best practices from a tier 1 instruction lens. We keep putting those up because we want people to hear those over and over again. The work though is about, are we doing that with Fidelity, right? And even with PBIS, like PBIS is happening in our buildings all across the board. There's positive, everyone has their phrase of safe, respectful, and responsible was North Bend Elementaries, right? And then there's red tickets versus, you heard Raven Bucks. I know Mr. Glover will talk about this for days and days, right? So they're all happening. And we know that there's evidence behind all those practices. It's just, are we doing each component well? And are we doing each component with fidelity, are kind of those questions. And same thing with academic. We know what works with teaching and learning. And so are we doing it with fidelity? Are we using the curriculum with fidelity? Are we looking at those tier 1 research-based academic practices and doing them in every classroom? And then same for tier 2 and tier 3. We know that what the research says, it's got to be done in small groups so that students are getting the attention from the adult that they need. And there's specific programs that we know work well, and they need to be rooted in evidence and not just, teachers winging it. And so we have, great programs going on like WIN, which are tier 2 interventions. Secondary, it's harder. We recently reached out to our consortium just to be like, hey, what are you all doing for tier 2 for academic screeners and this, that, and the other, and targeted interventions? And no one is further ahead than us. We modeled the answers we wanted from our consortium just so that they could, and we could be transparent as well. And we said, we're still in development phase, and everyone's like, that's a great way to put it. Yep, we're still in the development phase. And part of that is barriers with the schedule and, just things like that. But I will say that it's not that it's not happening. It's just maybe not with the exact components of what we know works best for MTSS, like a 6 to 8 week cycle with progress monitoring, because as you heard, Twin Falls, Rose Wilds is doing a math tier 2 intervention within their enrichment period with students from CC6 that struggled in their first quarter. And so that is essentially like a mini win happening. So that it's happening in our schools. It's just starting to move towards doing it all at the same time, all together with support.
Well, and that ties into the next one perfectly. That element number 4 is really about creating those structures and routines within our systems to ensure that we're effective across all tiers. And so establishing those clear systems, there's pockets of things happening, but making sure that those pockets are spread so that all students benefit those, and then creating the systems and the things that are needed in order for them to be led with fidelity and to see through. So barriers with the schedule and things like that. There's a lot of big things that need to be broken down in order to do that, but it all starts with really creating those systems, and the stronger your systems are, the more effective and efficient your programming can be. So whether it's through that PBIS and the teams, but it all boils down to not just one person, but this is collectively a group of people, whether it's the academic team or the behavioral team, or blending the two teams together, as many have, into MTSS teams, because like Andrea started us off, it's typically not just behavior, just academics. The two go hand in hand. And just making sure that we're consistent across the school. And then that just aligns directly with those tier 2 and the targeted supports, making sure within your system you have a referral and a screening system to identify kids who need that intervention, just the reinforcement and the enrichment pieces, so that we really are making sure we're meeting kids where they are. And then just matching, the interventions need to be appropriate, right? It's almost like a sentence if you give kids an intervention that doesn't work for them, or to put them in an intervention that they have to stay in permanently. There should be that the data, checking data, monitoring data, so it's more fluid than that. And again, in a system or a structure, that's hard to create. So it's not something we want to just wing and just like, let's try this, because it actually can not be good for kids if you don't get it set up right. So really aligning with the systems, and then obviously it connects to schedules, and then the PD that goes around it to make sure we're supporting.
So really from that, we kind of touched on this already, but our next steps are really to kind of do an audit, for a lack of better term, which is basically looking at each of our schools and knowing what those components are of MTS as we look towards, being compliant by 2028, 29 is who there's tiered fidelity inventories, really detailed rubrics around PBIS. And so using those rubrics and working with our principals to work through for each of their individual schools, because one school might be knocking out of the park with one component while another school isn't doing that component yet, but is knocking out of the park with another. So for lack of better terminology, we need to do an audit to figure out what are our tier one priorities and where are we doing well and who can we connect with each other. Because if OPSTED is rocking it at one thing and that's where SES needs to go, they can connect and then we can start to work towards making sure we're all doing all the components well and with fidelity. And then from there, that's when a manual and timeline kind of roadmap of how are we going to fill in all those gaps from what we find in our audit, like knowing where we're doing well and where we need to go. How do we create an implementation timeline from now until that 2028, 29? And then obviously we're going to be using data and defining what our data is going to be, because while we have some screeners in place, we need to have some of those academic screeners at the secondary, and we're phasing in Sabres for the SEL screener. We're piloting it this year at secondary. So really firming up what the data we're going to use consistently within that plan to look at for tier 1 and tier 2 across the board with our MTSS teams is part of our next step as well.
Okay, moving
Can
along.
Can I ask a quick question? I mean, throughout the MTSS, there is a lot of mention of data. Data is, collected, analyzed, and things like that. So my question about is, since data is so key to decision making and program design, what automations have you done so that you get near real time data, or or whatever the insights, however, because we have so much of innovations that is happening. Please take a look at it, and we have our technology director. They are very familiar with it.
Great question. I think part of it also is that's part of our curriculum adoption focus as well. Is what curriculums now come as part of the package where they have tier screeners in there that we can use and align with the Common Core standards and align with the curriculum, so we're not having to, because to create our own assessment and then collect the data and then manipulate the data in a way, it's so much harder.
Yeah.
And so I will say that curriculum companies know that that's what we're looking for now. So they're starting to get there, which then allows us to know that the data is going to come from exactly what we need for the MTSS purposes. And so luckily, by 2028, our critical adoptions in our course areas are going to kind of get there to be able to have it for math and ELA by then, which is really nice. And then from there, we have a wonderful data team, Fabiola and Amy is new. They're like the biggest wonderful data nerds ever. And they're ready to work with our tech department to be able to have that turned around quickly within our curricular-based assessments that will be evidence-based. So
Correct.
we're ready for it.
Okay. The second kind of component of the strategic plan has to do with those inclusive practices and universal design for learning. So we're going to touch upon that just real quickly. And I think one thing we wanted to point out is it's important for all stakeholders and us to be looking at UDL in the way that we're looking at it in schools. So the way that we're looking at it is really looking through those inclusive learning environments and creating systems and structures where all kids can access and get their needs met. So again, wherever they are on the spectrum from, what they need, that we're using what we have within our environments to help them get there. So the three key components that are really rooted in the success of that have to do with the engagement and the ways to motivate student interest in learning. So these are things like, your choice and your input in what you're doing, peer interactions, that collaborative learning, the relevance. Also representation. So how are we presenting our information as teachers or as people? Are we presenting it just, drill and kill or stand and lecturing, or is it in a variety of formats? Keywords here, it's like the multimedia. Are we using our technology? Are we using visual aids, graphic organizers? So I think a lot of people think these are accommodations or modifications, but really it's just what all people need, and what works for one may not work for all. So really having that variety in what we're doing. And then the third element that's rooted in that is really around that action and expression. And that's diverse ways for students to demonstrate their knowledge or skills. And we would say that, we've got greatness happening in pockets of it, but of those 3 elements, that's the area within our inclusive practices in UDL that we're continuing to work on and refine. And, within the 5 years of our strategic plan, we'll continue to get there.
One of the things I love about UDL is, they came out with the research that like my learning style, like auditory, kinesthetic, there really isn't anything. Like, it's not real. And then they turned it into like really what we've been trying to say is UDL, and it's just so much better defined now, and it makes so much more sense. So I think we're headed. If this is the first time it feels like what we're doing in education isn't just like a new thing that's brought it, you know what I mean, like a one-time deal with training. It really feels genuine to capture the work that good teaching has always looked like. So the things that are occurring right now with our profession is really professional development on UDL. While again, I just touched on, it's not new to teachers. It is new in like the language we use and those 3 components that Monica had mentioned. And so making sure that we all have the same understanding of those components is important. So elementary's PD focus with UDL has really been on those small group differentiation times, because that's often when they have the flexibility. They cover the Common Core and the direct instruction time, and then small group is really when they can start to do some of that tier 2, but also UDL for tier 1. And so that's been built into all of their small group PD this year. Secondary has been having UDL PD on each of the, they had an overview of UDL, and then they're having professional development on each of those 3 components that Monica touched on, with a focus on bringing lesson plans and actually overlaying a rubric, because, with elementary, you can get 3rd grade in a room and their jobs look similar, but when you get like culinary arts in a room with computer science, with calculus, it looks a little different. So the focus at secondary has been taking like a UDL planning guide and applying the UDL principles to lessons that they already have done, so that they can start to feel what changes they could make and tweak to existing lessons to pull off more UDL happening regularly in their classrooms.
And Andrea already touched upon this. The biggest things that we're doing in our next steps have to do with that professional development, but it's really also taking these concepts and interweaving them in everything that we do, so that our staff doesn't see this as a standalone, but those inclusive practices and the strategies around UDL is really something that's embedded in all that we do. And it doesn't matter if you're from the front office staff to, a classroom teacher or para supporting, that's ingrained in all of our work. So making sure that we're incorporating those strategies in our professional development, no matter what the content of that was for the day. And then around that measuring effectiveness, this is our areas where we're continuing to put our priorities, the refining, incorporating and building upon. I would say it's in the progress monitoring pieces, and knowing that we have real clear goals and we see where we want to go, but bringing in those systems and bringing in some of those assessments in different pieces, just to make sure that we can actually truly do in real time that progress monitoring, those pieces on a more global scale.
All right, the next component of goal 2 is the effective transitions and vertical alignment. And so really what does the evidence say that are components of effective transitions, which is orientation programs, and that covers both for students and for families. Peer leadership. So I know the high school students have talked before about like our version of Link Crew here, and the middle schools have that as well. But that peer-to-peer of like, how can I look to students that have already experienced their next grade level up in their next school, and how can I learn from them? Parental involvement is key, so that the parents know what to expect, especially like when you think about the transition from elementary to middle school. All of a sudden, your kid has 6 classes and a locker, and just those things that parents get nervous about. And then same thing with high school. Oh, credits matter now. Like, how do I check my kids' grades, and just things like that. So getting parents involved in the critical elements of those transitions is key. Vertical alignment from an academic perspective. So really, like, we should be knowing what the grade levels before and after us for our subject areas are doing, how they're incorporating even UDL and MTSS, so that then we know exactly where our students are coming from and where they're headed. We know that the research says we really need to focus on 9th grade. Quite a bit of research around intense support at 9th grade is key to success for the whole rest of high school. And then MTSS systems are critical to vertical alignment as well as social integration. So getting kids connected to clubs, to teachers that they have a social relationship with, so they feel like a trusted adult at school. So that social piece for each transition is key.
And Andrea already kind of summarized these pieces, so I won't go into it too much, just also for lack of time. But some things that we're doing that connect to those elements on that last slide. We have always done our, kickoff for kinder. Everybody's called it different things. We have a team of kindergarten teachers that have been coming together, and we're really looking at refining some of those practices, bringing in the community preschool partnerships even more to make sure that that transition is even stronger. It's always been good, but there's been room for growth and improvement. So we've all agreed upon now that our orientation, we're calling it Ready, Set, Kinder. So across the district, it's not confusing what's this one versus other, because I think that's feedback from parents too, is there's all these events and which is, what goes with this and that and the other thing. So the kickoff, the orientation is Ready, Set, Kinder. And then we also have at all schools, now they're seeing how kindergartners interact with each other. So they're bringing in the kinders and doing kinder play dates. Those are typically happening in August. I think all schools are pretty much on board now following this format, doing it in August. And then as part of the OSPI requirement and WA Kids is the family connection meetings that we do those first few days of school. So I feel like there's a really solid transition with very consistent practices. And now they'll be even more consistent starting in this spring. And then from 5th to 6th, our administrators and teachers have those conversations, and those are areas that in our ad council time, we've established some time just to incorporate feedback that we've gotten from parents, from teachers, and in the administrators themselves. So we'll do a little bit more work on the back end. They all have their orientation. So Raven for a Night, each of the school calls it a little something different, but a similar. And then the kids have the field trips to the middle schools, and then they still have their web program for the incoming 6th graders. And then that focus 8th to night, we have the Wildcat Night, which kicks it off, and then Wildcat Day, and then Cats Plus is like what used to be Linked Crew, right, to that? Yeah. And of course, the leadership and ASB and all these folks welcoming our freshmen and getting everyone situated.
So our next steps are pretty similar to what we talked about before the MTSS, like auditing our current practices within the aligning with the best practices of where do we need to fill in some gaps or our transitions. And it's also even doing things like hearing from our student reps around, sure, you're doing all those things, but what do our 9th graders say about how that actually feels? Like where are they saying that we're hitting it out of the park, and where are they saying there were gaps? And so we can rely on our student voice to give us feedback of what's going well and what's not. We're starting to collaborate a lot more on like adoptions together, so that from a curricular lens, there's consistency in what curriculum we're selecting vertically within our ELA and math programs. We got quite a bit of feedback from the Math Summit that it would be great to do this for more subjects on maybe a little bit of a smaller scale. It's not probably realistic to do a whole day for like every single subject. So we are looking ahead to doing some mini summit work as part of our August back to work days, where science, just even the math teachers saying it was nice to be in a room with K-12 math teachers to be able to talk math. So we heard that feedback, and this will be great for vertical alignment. Monica has a kinder onboarding committee to talk about those consistent practices for not just naming it Ready, Set, Kinder, but all the components that go into that. We're reconvening the math pathway committee, which helps with vertical alignment from elementary all the way through high school for math courses. And so we're excited about all this. Oh, it's still me. The last part, we're on the last one, is a parent and family engagement. So we kind of made this visual because while the strategic plan calls out two-way communication, there's also some really great one-way communication that we want to build upon to make sure our families know about this. So two-way, just some examples are things like the Math Summit, forums, listening sessions, advisory councils, focus groups, where we can just really dialogue with our parents about our school district and what's going well and what's not, and get really targeted feedback from folks. But there's also an opportunity to do more with one-way communication. And so really we're calling all of this Parent University, which is just making sure our parents are on the same page as us around and educating our parents. I once had a parent, actually was a school board member in my previous district, who was a parent, who talked about when they log into Skyward, they're like, when it says midterm and then quarter and then semester, and from someone who speaks the language, I would never have even thought about that being a gap for parents' understanding of how they log into Skyward. And what an easy problem to solve, right? We can just start educating parents on how to read that at curriculum night or whenever. And so Parent University would be things like doing more of those summits, forums, and having that two-way communication, but also having potentially, I always say for lack of a better term, like TikTok-like videos that are like short and simple, that is like, here's how you read your students' grades in Skyward. Here's how you access sports registration and Arbiter Sports. Here's how you, so really simple, accessible, quick ways and tutorials for parents to understand all the different various complicated components of public education.
Can you include the way you get the emails sent for missing assignments and grade?
Yep. We're going to talk about generating that list.
So is there a way to change the name to Parent University? Because most of the parents have come out of university and they don't want to go back to university.
Parent remediation.
I don't know that very well.
It's interesting too, because a lot of these things have been available on the website, but because our format and how we look at things has changed. So, it used to be directions and screenshots and you could walk through, and now everybody's like, no, I don't want to look at that. But if you put it together in a quick little video, that's the way. So it's a matter of converting resources and things that we have out there already that don't maybe get access. We're like, what do you mean? So again, meeting parents where they are in that communication. And it seems like that video platform is something that's been very useful. Some things that are occurring are communication tools. Obviously, Parent Square has been huge on so many regards. Schoology continues, our social media platforms, but just again, finding ways that work best for all stakeholders. Making information accessible, translation services. I pulled some numbers today because I thought it's ever changing. I think we have really good with our language access plan, things in place to meet the needs of our families. But of all of our families, there are roughly 110 families that need translation and interpretation. So we know at the building level who they are. They have a database, they have everything that they need, and then the tools. And in that 110, there are 48 different languages spoken.
Wow.
So it isn't, that's one challenge that we have here in a small district is it isn't that there's just a predominant one or two languages, but of the families. And it's not just multilingual students, right? Some of our families, their kids are not in our ML programs, right? They're proficient in English. So of that 110, that's the other educating piece we've tried to do is it's not just, they're like, oh, those are ML kids. So they're being taken care of. This is the parent side. But 48 different languages to me out of 110 families, that was a lot. Our top is still Spanish, and then Russian and Hindi are they flip flop within one or two families of them, and then the others are all one or two offs here or there. So thankful for Parent Square and several of the other things that we have because we wouldn't be able to keep up with that many different languages, and some of them are hard. There aren't databases or translation tools for them. And so figuring out what that can be, but we know who those families are too. So these are things that are working well. And then just continuing to work with our PTSAs and building those family events. I know North Bend tonight has their multicultural fair going on, and everyone is doing such great events to try and bring parents in. And we met with Henry and Grayson yesterday about some great ideas. And one of the things I think that is always to remember, and not just them, this is us that we were talking about, is we have ideas, but making sure we ask the stakeholders what their ideas are to what best they feel like is in the support. And a lot of times it's us starting, but then we get rolling with this and making sure that we hear what they feel would build that welcoming environment or what people need. So that goes back to that parent universities and the two-way communication. Andrea already we went through these already, so I'm not going to double up on that. Next steps.
So we already touched on this, but basically it's going to take a while to build Parent University future to be named better, all those short videos and to pick all the content, because we could make a lot, right? And then it takes time to make quality videos. So really what we want to start doing is to get feedback from folks on what are those topics, what has the greatest sense of urgency, the biggest bang for our buck, to prioritize the rate and order in which we create that content for our parents. And what do we have to capacity to take on so that we can actually, do that. And that capacity to take on is things things like summits. So like we can't probably pull off a whole day summits and then expect us to do really quality action after the fact. So we have to prioritize what order we do the, not that we can't do it, it's just probably we can't do that all like this spring, you know, in every subject area and then expect capacity to meaningfully apply what we learn from those. So just kind of creating a priority order, and we would love feedback from you all, have been parents in the system around some of those video content things of what do you think would be the biggest bang for our buck, because summer is a great opportunity for us to build that content when things are just a little bit slow without students that generally create more work for us. So so that is that's our next steps for that. So that's the end of our, those are the all 4 components of goal 2. Are there any other questions?
I'll have to say that, you know, the 2 of you are our elementary and secondary leaders for our district. I don't know, I think back, you started to talk about where we came from or what we had, and to be a parent with kids in the district, it's quite exciting and encouraging to know where we're going. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Yep, and great job with the slides, because there's a lot of content on there for others that can look at it, but you guys just hit high level, so good job. And good job on the work too, that's more important. More important than the deck, but yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
You done? No. Yep. Are you done? With your section?
I'm done with
You
my
hand me it
section.
over. Okay. All right, so moving on to board review and or action items, and we have one policy that we are reviewing tonight, policy 3210, non-discrimination. It's the first reading. It looks like this is a new one.
No changes or
No,
comments.
yep, I have no
Change.
do we comment?
Sorry. Yeah. Excuse me. Just checking, I'm sure this is what was given to us.
Yep.
But I am surprised that the language in the definition does not match the state definition, and leaves out some specific things. And I'm wondering if that's something we should look into.
It might be that it's covered in another policy.
So, yeah, one of
yeah.
the things that's usually in the lists, and I looked and it's not in Washington's, it is in some other places, but is the other policy that we put, that was in the consent agenda
Right.
about pregnancy.
Yep.
And so parental status and pregnancy, that is normally in a list like this. And I'm like, why do we have a separate one instead of this? But, so I thought that when I read that one,
Yep.
then I got here and I'm like, this is missing another thing. And so I'm wondering if that is,
We can double check that.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
double check. It may be
Yeah.
covered in another policy, because it's kind of shocking to me that we even need this, that this is a new policy, because
Right.
it's so basic. Like
right?
this should be an inherent policy that we should have been having
Well,
first. So I'm
We
wondering what,
articulate it because it's
yeah.
legal.
yeah, and it's likely a legal change in RCW or something that
It's
we,
marked essential, which is usually a
yeah,
law
so
or
we,
policy
we
change.
probably have to do it word for word if it's a
Right. And
essential.
that's why I'm like, if it's essential and it's word
It's
for
probably
word.
duplicative. It's,
we have
I would
Yeah.
imagine, and it's an RCW, which maybe we've got a policy that wasn't essential that covers it as well,
Go
but
back
yeah,
to the
I,
bottom
Okay.
and
I agree. When I
check.
saw it, I was
Yeah.
like, this is really big. Like, how do we not already have?
It's not new.
Yeah.
It's
You
not-
would think we'd already
okay.
be covering this, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
also this is not a new one. It's been there for since 16, so we're
Okay.
revising it
Mhm.
to align with any
With the
RCWs.
RCW, yeah.
But we'll check the definition.
Yeah, we'll check.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so we have one note that we're going to check, but beyond that, are we okay moving it on?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, cool. All right, moving on to future meeting dates and good of the order. We do not have, well, we have, teachers have school on Monday, but it's a non-student day on Monday. The only other note here for folks is that we are going down to, what is the plan for this weekend?
No, we are not.
We are not going, never mind. Okay,
Nelson schedules it.
scratch that. Okay.
Gary is working on rescheduling that.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
Excellent. And we do have office hours scheduled for January 28th, if there's anyone listening
Oh, right.
and wants to sign up for that. And I don't, do we have anyone signed up yet at this
We
point?
have.
Awesome. Okay. Very good. I don't really have anything else I want to highlight. Is there any good of the order before we move into our work session?
Well, do you have any?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
Budget session is on, and multiple bills went through their first committee rounds this week. And I just want to encourage everyone to watch for action items from whatever organization you're connected to. It might feel like or sound like it'll be really complicated, but once you've done it once to sign in or to even write a little note, you'll see it's actually really easy, and it can be the difference between getting out of committee and not getting out of committee to have a lot of sign-ins. So listen for those action committee. They go through. This is their first committee round. There'll be more next week, and then it'll go through appropriations if that's needed. Then it will go to the other house and need to be through their committee again. So it's not kind of a one and done, but all through ledge session, just keep your ears open because we're there. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Good heads up. All right. Is there any other good of the order? If not, we will move into the work session at 6:35.
Awesome.
All right. Do we want to
Yeah,
reconfig?
we'll need about five or
could
so
use a
minutes.
break.
5 minutes. I'm going to
Shuffle
go
break.
try on my
Your
pre-code.
your zip. Quarter zip.
That's
Oh,
right,
yeah, that's
shopping.
great. B, C, B, A, and double A, and triple A. I hope they get at least on a C.
I'm the isolated one here.
Okay, Mr. Stokes will kind of kick us off, and some of this will be reviewed, just to remind ourselves where we've been and what we're looking at. And then we'll ask some reflection at the end and hopefully get some next steps. So I will turn it over to Mr. Stokes to get us started.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Looking forward to tonight and hearing your thoughts. We're going to do a couple of things, as Dan mentioned. We'll first just kind of review and refresh our memories on the Capital Facility Citizens Facility Advisory Committee recommendations. And then we'll go into some additional information that I think is helpful as you consider our next steps. And we'll talk about what a bond timeline could look like and then kind of get your input after that. So feel free to, we'll do a check kind of halfway through and see if you've got questions. But if you've got a burning one, interrupt me. That's fine too. You guys know the drill on that. So again, Citizens Advisory Committee, we started before COVID and stopped during COVID. So it really, most of the work was done in 20 to 2022. So about a 2-year plan or 2-year work with some citizens and helping us look at what is a 20-year plan for the district. What are our facilities needs? Let's have a more long-range plan that we can communicate with our valley on what we think we will need in the long term, and then have some short-term phases to start getting after some of those things. As you recall, when the board approved that recommendation last March, the first phase recommendation was to do North Bend Elementary, Falls City, and SMS as some of the higher priority buildings. This little matrix might be something familiar that was in the recommendation. We tried to build a rubric to try to score all of the buildings. And I would couch the 2 areas that we really looked at as a committee were the educational adequacy of the building. So are there appropriate learning spaces given how we want to teach now versus how they taught when the buildings were built? Are there shared learning spaces? Are there opportunities for students to not just be in a sit and get environment? And then educational adequacy also has to do with just portable density. So the buildings that have 50% of their capacity in portables scored higher in this rubric because we felt like there's going to be portables in most of our buildings, but at some point there's so many that the experience that the children have, the lost learning as they try to go to the bathroom and have all the distance is a little bit inequitable to buildings that are more current in our system. The other kind of category of that matrix that we built, that rubric, was just facility adequacy. Which buildings are costing the most to maintain? Which ones do we have problems with all the time? What is student capacity compared to enrollment as we can see it in future growth? And then probably also, I didn't put this wasn't in the matrix, but a very high underlying note was also just general safety as far as how those buildings operate from a safety perspective. So we didn't score those necessarily for safety, but that's also just a good recommendation or thing to remember. So the prioritization, since that matrix is kind of hard to see, the top 3 in that matrices was Falls City, North Bend, and Snoqualmie Middle, which is partly why the committee landed on that as the first phase recommendation. And then Ofsted and Snoqualmie Elementary were kind of next on that list, as well as some other buildings, and those were incorporated into future phases as well. And just to remind you of what those kind of look like, remember North Bend Elementary can't do a renovation, and so because of the floodway location, and so this could be what a rebuilt North Bend Elementary looks like. It would have to be elevated because it's in the floodway and have some parking underneath it, and so that would be very not dissimilar to Mount Si as far as building on the play fields, then demolishing the building and replacing the play fields.
Ryan, it's really important also to improve the traffic flow around that school.
Yes.
At
That's a
what point
good
do
point,
we
Gary.
consider that in the
That
plan?
was what we asked the architects to do as they were looking at it. So as you look at this layout, on the north side or the top of the page, I guess not the north, is the bus lane. And that would really be going through the parking lot where the preschool facility is, which isn't great, but it would separate the buses from the cars, which is one of the major problems for North Bend, is trying to get those in and out.
And then you can see there's a couple of different parking areas, as well as there would be parking underneath part of that building. So because of the location of North Bend, I don't know that it's going to be like a smooth sailing parking experience or pickup and drop off. But I think this gives some better, there, you can see that kind of long queue on the bottom right. It gives some opportunities. And I think what was important for us was getting the buses and cars separated.
I think that's important, and also, I can't remember what the name of that street is with the night that runs along QFC there. But that's the current like overflow queue line, and it backs up to the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
So if we can take that, bend it around onto the street that runs in front of the school, and then that's where they come in, you're gonna talk about 40 to 60 more cars in that
Yep.
that stretch. So that's gonna be a huge improvement.
And to clarify, like these were just concepts that NAC did for us. It's not full design. And so if we were to get to where we were doing a full design, those considerations would come in and they would have a traffic engineer help us kind of engineer it the best way possible and lay it out with the parameters or the constraints that we have of the building. But that was definitely a consideration that the committee talked about as far as improving parking and pickup and safety. So this is kind of NAC's scheme of what that could look like. Again, we haven't really fully designed it, but just wanted to have some pictures so people could envision what that could look like. Falls City Elementary would be similar, again, because of the nature of the facility. The committee felt like a rebuild over a remodel was advantageous, and we went through that last March when you approved the recommendation. But just to refresh your memory on where this is, the building, again, would get situated on the playfields, and then the current building would turn into the playfields, and we'd maintain the historic gymnasium there for other uses, which could be a community use asset or a preschool type of facility, all kinds of things we could do with that.
It's a beautiful drawing, but I want to know like the technical challenge in designing and building the new school with the troublesome field we have with the septic there.
The septic really, so the septic is over here in these trees.
Is it? Okay.
And so the nice thing is you'd be building a new septic, and we'd be able to put it kind of where you're at. Like the challenge, and Brandon's here with us as well, and so pipe in if I'm saying wrong, but that's really the challenge. The septic where it was, is just got a lot of growth. We have playgrounds and stuff next to it, so there's not really you can't expand it in that place. So last fall we had a couple of the drains were plugged up and it was getting backed up, and Brandon's team got in and found tree roots had basically infiltrated the drain pipes to where they were completely blocked. And so his team got a fun activity of trying to like rip all those roots out and stuff. So that was included in the 2015 bond, was a septic replacement, and we've just been holding off until we know, are we keeping Fall City where it is and we'll then fix the septic and give it another 20, 30 years, or are we moving and let's use that money to then move it. So Brandon and Bill's team have both done a good job keeping it running. But it's, every couple of years we've got to do something on that to keep it going. But it's, a 60, 70-year-old septic system, so it's great that it's still working.
I know, that's what when he showed us that these three buildings for almost 70 plus years.
Yeah.
It's amazing that we're still pulling it through.
And again, just from the facilities committee, just some ways to envision what it could look like. We haven't gone through any of the design work. Snoqualmie Middle is a little different because would be a new location. It would be on land up at Snoqualmie Ridge, which would require in all likelihood a reboundary. What we would think is Timber Ridge and Cascade View would feed into the new Snoqualmie Middle, and SES would go down to Chief Canum instead of Timber Ridge as it is now. This was the layout design done when we ran the bond to build a middle school here. So we again haven't done any extra work other than there's some wetlands on there, and but we know conceptually we can fit a middle school on there. What Brandon and I did here since the board approved the CFAC recommendation last spring was it's been 3 or 4 years. We've done some maintenance on some of the buildings. And so he and I kind of worked through those 3 buildings in particular, as well as the others, to just say, would that matrix, that prioritization matrix that the committee worked on, would it look different now if we were doing it? And there's some changes to it, but I don't think it's materially changed the rank order of those top three. It didn't bring another building up above that, but it might be something that we want to do if we proceed, is to let's re-update that prioritization and scoring system so the community can see where we are at currently. There's a couple of things, you know, as you're balancing this, that I've asked Brandon to kind of help share with us. Those buildings, if we don't proceed with a rebuild, have some pretty significant maintenance things going on with them that we would need to get some sort of funding, or just know that we've got some pretty large maintenance projects in the hopper to do those. So Brandon, you want to kind of show the board?
Sure, I'll pass out this piece of pipe, so, we've replaced sections of pipe before my time, and then last year, knock on wood,
Connor,
we
you
did
have a
not
picture of that?
have to replace any. But I'm not really sure if it's the solder that is failing or electrolysis, but it's definitely been an issue for years now. Again, I've gotten lucky and haven't had to do any this year, but it's definitely failed.
Is that like a total repipe?
So that'd be a total repipe, you know, and it is elevated a little bit. There's crawl space under there, so it's not undoable. But you are getting into every classroom's got to open up the walls to get into the sinks, and so it's a fairly large job.
Any estimate, like,
I
half
have
is
not,
what,
I have
like
not
4,000
estimated.
for pet?
If I was to guess, it'd be around the 350,000, and that's just rough.
At least, yeah.
The bathrooms in there, you know, that thing it's not on a concrete slab, it's all wood floor. And, just over the years, those, all the bathrooms in there, they're getting dry lined. So, you know, we're gonna have to do something. I mean, I could put a Band-Aid on it for now and it'll be fine for the next 4 or 5 years. Or we actually go a step further and make them truly nice bathrooms. So I'm kind of teetering on that. Septic was brought up, you know, when we, the roots out there from those big trees, we pulled out every pipe. So there was 8 sections of pipe out there for the drain field, and we pulled out 10 feet or longer of roots that were just solid. I mean, we couldn't barely pull them with the tractor. They're that compact. So, you know, obviously things started backing up, and we ended up going out there cutting the pipe just to get water movement. But it took a good week for us to get those drained out, and I have a feeling they're going to come back within 5 years.
Is that cement pipe?
No, it was actually plastic. So at some point that has been.
So during the
Something's
remodel in '99.
At some point that has been taken care of, the drain field. But you know, in a lot of cases, they don't allow you to put a drain field back in the same drain field. Right? So you gotta have reserve, and to do that, you're talking going all the way out to the field. So that's probably another lift station pump to pump it out to there. So that one could be.
Because you have to go past all the playground areas up there.
So that'd be a large project.
Maybe in the current parking lot, if it was moved.
Correct.
Well, if we moved the building, you'd put the septic by the building.
Or possibly,
I don't think I don't,
we'd move.
because you wouldn't want to,
septic in the
you
drain
wouldn't
field.
want your septic going all the way across the property to a drain field.
That'd be something to cost out though, if we had to redo our septic field because it fails, what would that cost be? Just in the plain thing, how much repiping would be, and we add up all those costs, and then you talk about, here's your new school.
Yep.
It starts making that a yes.
Now, when we talk about the cost of a whole elementary school, it's pennies compared to that. But without a bond, you know, $1 million to do a septic. Now we have $500,000 or $600,000 from the prior bond, but you know, the $1 million projects are they add up. So they're not insurmountable. It's just to have some awareness that if we don't run a bond, these might be kind of larger projects that we lump together
You
and
need to
something
absorb
else.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Or do something else.
Can you
Another
remind me what
levy
the
or something.
threshold is of cost and amount of change that we can do before we hit the,
The ones in the floodway, you can improve up to 50% of the value of the building before you have to flood proof it. And so when you're talking about, you know, taking an additional wing onto the building so that you can get rid of most of your portables, that would quickly exceed
Pick us up,
50% of the
yep.
value of the building.
We can do minimal improvements without
A-
having.
And you
spread
wouldn't be able
what
to
we saw
address some
for
of the
North
other
Bend.
concerns like at North Bend that we had, the gym and the cafeteria are located on the opposite side of the play fields. And if you were designing it right, you'd have those together because then kids leave
Yeah.
cafeteria and go to the play fields, or just the safety and security as far as where it's at and some of those challenges.
So then that is, might be good information to have. What is that?
Yep. Yeah, and that was in the report from the facilities committee. There's kind of some in-depth on that.
Okay.
And how much could you renovate, or why, Fall City was more of a renovate versus replace, and the renovate was, you could do it, but it would take longer and you would have impact with you'd be dropping in
Right.
20 portables while they built a wing and then do that again for a couple years. And so the cost of all that staging was not terribly a lot less than just
Same as a
rebuilding.
rebuild,
So
yep, yeah.
Even for that, you need to raise a bond or something like that.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There is no,
Yeah.
rebuild,
Yep.
renovate doesn't mean that we can get without new money.
Maintenance levy passes with 50% and
Sure.
construction bond
Yeah.
is 60.
So if
Sure.
if the board decided not to move forward with doing anything with Fall City right now, would we try to get this work done this summer?
I don't know that we'd be able to get all of it
Not
done in a
ready.
summer. It's
Okay.
it's really just to have you guys have an awareness of all the buildings. These three are the ones that have maintenance systems that are high dollars to work on.
Gotcha.
And so Brandon's doing a good job monitoring it and will keep us informed. We always try to knock some off in the summer, so we might be able to pick one off depending on the cost. It's just something to be aware of, that if we don't do anything with the buildings, we'll have some other kind of big ticket items that we'll have to address. So multiple ways to do that, and that's not really the purpose of tonight. It was just to let you know that, these are bigger issues than at SES or at Opstead or some of the other buildings that didn't score as high.
It's revalidating the three buildings that
Yeah.
were identified previously for all of the other reasons as well.
Yep,
Which
and like
I'm
the,
assuming the safety is also
A big one.
just, if anything,
Hasn't changed.
enhances the fact that these three
yeah,
are and I don't want to ever say that we think our buildings are unsafe, but if we would look at our buildings, these are the ones that we would say, ugh, we probably, if we have money to do something, we probably would address these three. Is that right?
I think so.
If I can ask this, I don't know how much time and effort it's gonna take to estimate the maintenance cost, maintenance and upkeep of these three buildings, because everything has a lifespan, and septic systems or water pipes or bathroom flooring and all that stuff. If there is a way to estimate what is the cost that we are going to incur on a year-to-year basis versus, if we
It's
had.
still, but I mean, I think this is what, we can get a number, but it is pennies on $100 bill
Correct.
compared to the bond,
And we'll
so.
get to that. Ryan's gonna
Yeah.
get to that, some of that cost.
But
And I think
it could be
Tough, but
helpful. I mean,
yeah, you guys can, because some of these are newer, right?
What's
I
probably more
mean,
helpful, in my opinion, if we're trying to communicate effectively to community, is these are kind of big things that, we can continue to fix leaky pipes and have them break and take out in a classroom and have to move the classroom for a week while we try to quickly fix the the water damage. North Bend Elementary is another
Yeah, that North Bend Elementary. So I'm sure you guys heard last year before, the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
It's all wet system, so no dry system. And the system, they've got the sprinklers that cover all that perimeter of the building is all wet. So once we get a freeze down in that, the teens,
yeah, we're
it all
done.
freezes inside the building.
all the sprinkler heads break because
Yeah.
they're not
Right, we-
insulated and
we have
they're sticking outside the building.
30 some sprinklers on the outside of the building that break.
Which we have had breaks and had to
Yep.
close the school a few
Yeah, last
times
yeah,
since
last
I've
year
been
was,
in. Yeah.
North Bend only on that.
Yep.
We've had some closures, although Cascade View had.
But North Bend has been frequent. I think 2 or 3 times we've
Yeah.
had,
I
the
feel like
sprinkler
that's-
itself has broken and we've had to go in and fix it.
So ideally, it'd just be to eliminate those wet sprinklers on the outside of the building and put in a dry system. It's gonna be kind of ugly because you got pipe everywhere around the outside of the building, but that would fix that problem.
It would
But
keep-
that's
Keep education continuity and then also just eliminate the emergency maintenance issues that we have.
I think when I think about the buildings, that we're talking about, they are just built in another time. And so the things that we would need to do to make those buildings meet the needs of our students, even close to having, shared collaborative spaces and having classrooms that are right-sized and having
Yep.
a gym that makes sense for the needs. And all of that adds up. So even if we keep the buildings and do the maintenance, there are other things that our students need us to do
Are not going to be addressed.
that are not going to be addressed in that.
And that was really I would say that was the main focus of the facilities committee.
Yep.
Right.
We just wanted to give you an update on the maintenance side because it's been 3 years. So what's changed? Some of the maintenance things, the maintenance concern has elevated a little bit in some of these because we've had more breaks of these sprinklers. And so eventually we should just,
So can we, in the interest of time, can we
Yep.
just talk about the big changes? Because I think
Sure.
I know what all of these are.
same thing with the
SMS is
estimate.
just a hot mess. I mean,
And it's
so I
got
don't know
piping
how
with
it can-
couplers and those
Starts-
couplers are like a rubber seals that can
mean.
fail. So they've got,
Got
you
it.
know, the covered walkway is cantilevered.
Yep.
And so we've done a lot of roof work, but there is soft spots.
Yep.
You really need to, Brandon says, kind of cut the walkway in half and
Yep.
get some of that. So
Supported.
it's just,
And the safety.
And the safety.
Yeah, I was
aspect.
going to say, and
Which
there's
again,
not air
we
conditioning.
do not
One
consciously
thing I want
have
to stress is,
unsafe
I've been in,
buildings, but
I've seen a lot of buildings before.
We wouldn't
These
build them the
buildings are
same way now.
maintenance wise are in good shape. I mean, they're nice buildings, but they're outdated. They're old, and there's always going to be something. Right? I mean, these aren't huge deals, but it's still going to be expensive.
Yep.
So otherwise, that's really.
And I think these are things that the committee did not.
right, they're
necessarily
changes.
consider.
Yeah.
we didn't focus high because it was
Yep.
focused more on the educational adequacy. And we had kind of a maintenance need that Bill and I had worked with. And so that's the update.
Sure,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
Thanks,
thank
Brandon.
thanks for that.
Thank
That's
you.
so
Very,
much.
very
Thanks, Brandon.
helpful.
So let's move into finance. Again, the facilities committee did a lot of this, and I'm going to preface it with the costs that I'm showing you here are my kind of very high level guesses. We did some cost estimating for the facilities committee, and I've inflated those costs as the timeline has moved. We haven't spent money on having an architect give me an actual current cost estimate. So if we were to proceed, that would be something to do is kind of fine tune that a little bit.
Sure.
And with 3 buildings, if a measure with 3 buildings is what we coalesce around, that's a long time window, and it's important that we have enough cushion in those budgets to not come up short like our neighbors have, and then have to run a bond because we
Ran out of money.
we
Yep,
ran out of
yep.
money, because that will be a death knell for us. So
Or had to use it for other
so
things.
this is really just for purposes of you knowing that this is the range of the cost, and it could be plus or minus 5 or 10%, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yep.
Elementary school, and this is estimating the cost when it would go out to bid. So a bond initiative happens, we go a couple years design, and then you bid, and so you're kind of doing the midpoint of the construction, because that's what a contractor would be bidding. So this is not today's cost, it's cost 2 or 3 years down the road. So an elementary school, we think, is about $105 million. Cost escalation has gone crazy, both labor and materials. You know, Timber Ridge was built in 2016 for $33 million. So it's triple the cost now,
Yep.
and we've talked about that quite a bit. The middle school, I think, is about, based on what we had done from the committee, is probably about $200 million. So if you take 2 elementaries and a middle, that's 415 or 410, let's call it 425 million, just to kind of give us a starting point.
What
Whoops.
was the bond for the high school amount?
244 with
Timber Ridge.
22 million of 20 million of state funding, the state match, to kind of be our cushion. So this is our tax rate history in the district. The yellow is our EP&O levy, the green is our tech levy, the blue is school bonds. So you see in 2015, when we passed the bond, the tax rate for the bond went up quite a bit. And then those have started to come down. We had a drop in 2023, which was our target to try to maybe do an initiative with a 0 tax increase, and stupid COVID kind of derailed all those plans. And I think the tax rate can be misleading because assessed valuations have also gone crazy lately.
That's what, they have doubled almost.
So I don't know how useful that is, but that's a typical thing people see. I also just want to talk to you about bond versus levy. Lake Washington has a policy to run levies, and we can talk a little bit about that. There's a couple of reasons why, and there's pros and cons to both of those. So bond needs 60% right now of authorization. There is legislative activity to try to make it 55%. We'll see if that happens, but the bond is a much higher threshold. It is way harder to get that last 10% than the 50% of a levy. The financing duration is a little bit different. So a bond, you can sell those bonds and pay them off over 20 years. So that spreads that cost out. Whereas a levy, you can levy up to 6 years, and you're collecting money each year instead of all up front and paying off the bonds in that. So from a cash flow perspective, from construction, that impacts it, because a bond, you could collect all that money pretty upfront. We would step it out based on when construction would happen, but you can get started on your construction. For a levy, you would need to start collecting those levy dollars before you start construction, because you have to have the cash to be able to pay the construction bill. And so for us, a levy would probably delay construction for a couple of years. And I'll show you kind of what our bond and levy options could be on that.
But the cost of the money for bond is higher though.
You're borrowing it over a longer period of time, but you'll see kind of how that impacts what we can get done. And so Lake Washington has taken an approach that they're doing levies. It's easier, I think, for them because they just did a construction levy in November, and it was 112 million per year at a very small tax rate increase, and it passed with 53%. So they're doing it every year. For a smaller district, the cost of that levy is
So they can do 100 million a year for 6 years?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was around $800 million
So
levy.
how long is that impact the tax rate?
6 years.
6 years.
So-
It's
But
done.
then they're done, so.
Because they're running a 6-year levy. We're doing these projects, and then we're gonna do another 6-year levy, and then
And
these
then
are,
those-
So they have to keep,
they're doing levies
additional
because they
levy.
can do it with 50%.
and trying to just keep a pile of money in there.
Yep.
But that
For the next
also ends up resulting in the taxpayers paying for as long as they keep,
Well, they're not paying as much interest because they're
right?
They're not
just-
paying any interest,
Right.
right? Pretty
But is
much.
it a longer
Overlapping
duration?
payments, because a 6-year and then you start another one the next year for 6 years.
Yeah.
And then, so you have a cascade of all those
That-
payments. on
yeah.
your
You
bill.
could, if you're able to collect 100 million per year, you could build an elementary school
Yep.
every year
Every year, exactly.
and continue to refresh. Now they have way more buildings, so
Yes.
Yeah.
it's just interesting. I'll show you
lot of
I'll show you
campaigns
what that
and
means for us. But
Yeah.
Issaquah ran a bond of
Okay.
of 600 million, and it barely got over 50%. And they're now rerunning here in February. We'll see what happens. But and it's hard, I think, to compare every other district and what they're doing
Yep.
because every district has a different story.
Yep.
Issaquah has a story, and I think that hurt their ability to pass it. But so for purpose of tonight, we can finance with a bond or a levy, and I'll show you a little bit about kind of what that means. But it also changes the timeline for us. Oops, sorry. So a $425 million bond, if we were to do all three in a voter package, you'll see DA Davidson kind of projects that we would increase the tax rate by about 92 cents per thousand. Our average assessed valuation in the valley is just under $1 million. So by the time we get to 2027, it'll be $1 million. So for a taxpayer, we'd be asking them to foot a $920 a year bill to build these 3 buildings.
In addition to
An
what they're paying
incremental
now
cost of $900 to $1,000.
annually.
Yep. For 20 years. Now you can see there are some out years where some of the existing bonds, sorry, as I highlight that, it kind of doesn't.
They start going.
Some of the existing bonds start to pay off, and so you do get some step downs, and so you can structure it a little bit differently. What we try to do is try to aim for a consistent rate for at least 5 or 6 years, so voters aren't getting swung around. But again, AVs can change, and your tax bill can change, and so it's a little bit hard to go. So that 92 cents, I asked DA Davidson to kind of run me what that would be in a levy. What would that generate if we did a levy? So a levy at that rate for 6 years would get us a net of $111 million. So one of the elementary projects you could do within that 6-year window. The challenges be, I wouldn't be able to start construction until 2031 because it would be completed in 2032, and I need all 6 years of collections to pay for that building. So if you're if you're thinking from a, you know, a bond over 20 years and you could do 3, or you do a levy and you could still do 3 over that 20 years, but it might be harder to do anything else.
And the taxpayers are not saving.
They'd be paying the same, but
They're
only for
still paying
6 years, not for 20.
I know, but 6 years isn't enough to do the job, so,
Well, 6 years could do 1.
So
okay,
you'd be-
one, but.
That's
One
why
one
I think,
elementary,
I
not
think
one.
levies is a little bit hard for our district just because it's
Yeah.
not big enough to really generate,
Well, I mean, if
but it
it's
is an option.
one, we could also look at doing a bond for one, right? And then it's gonna,
and it would be
but it's
cheaper.
not gonna be 4.22, so.
So is Lake Washington running another levy just to pay for the things that the state doesn't fund?
They have their own EPNO levy and their own
Yeah,
tech
so they're
levy.
having to run
They
that
run
as well.
Capital levy.
But
So
It's
they
a-
do
it's a-
two
for
levies.
they do another capital levy because for
Okay.
Lake Washington, so like our 92 cents or 92 cents for 425 million. Lake Washington's doing 112 million a year for 6 years, so it was about $700 million. That their increase was only 38 cents. In their bond proposition, they say the increase is 89 cents on average over the 6 years because their increment is as it's cascading down, and so they actually were pretty transparent that like this is an add of 90 cents,
Right.
but it's replacing some things that are expiring. So net, it would
Net is
cost them
38 cents.
38
But they were
cents.
transparent like we were with our last
Yeah.
one.
But, you know, 38 cents to capture 600 million in 6 years, and we're doing 90
It's just a
cents for
slow
100 million.
roll.
So it's just different.
But it's not uncommon to run, I mean, we run 2 levies pretty much all the time, because we normally run our tech levy and our EPNO levy. The construction levies are, how recent have these become popular?
I think they've become more popular as people have realized that getting to 60%
It's
is
really
a
hard.
very high hurdle.
I think really Lake Washington is the one that I've seen doing.
Lake Washington and
Yeah.
Everett, I think,
They're
have
starting,
kind
but
of
they kind of
gone
followed
that
Lake
way.
Washington to-
Yep.
The bigger districts where you can get a
Probably.
significant amount of money each year and actually knock projects out, it makes sense.
Sense for us, it's tough.
It's hard in my mind to say, hey, will you vote on this? And we'll start construction in 4 years and we'll only get one building. So I don't,
Particularly when we know all these maintenance issues are possibly.
if you
gonna-
had like one building that needed to happen
Yep.
and it was like, this is our highest priority,
Yep.
sure, maybe you could do it. But I
This would be.
anyway, it's a,
20 elementary schools and you were just gonna keep running it and eventually.
Yeah.
continue to
Well,
fund.
and then
Just
what if
becomes
the
part
other
of
one
the
doesn't
function.
pass, and then you've got one that may be all the way done, may not be all the way done, and then
Another
do we
100
run it?
million.
yeah,
it-
yeah. And it's kicked that cost down.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't be able to start the next one for another 10 years. And
Yep.
so that cost would be 150 million instead of
Right.
100 million or whatever. So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You can start it in 4 years, assuming that everything
Yeah.
stays
Yeah.
stable.
Yep.
Yeah.
okay, so that's the cost of bond versus levy. Here's just from DA Davidson, kind of the bond passage rate by year. And it's not surprising, right? Like pre-COVID, it was decent. Half the bonds, kind of on average, I'd say about half of bonds passed. So people were running 2 or 3 times if they needed it. Since COVID, you know, I think everyone's been gun shy. Enrollment has dropped. So I don't know what that indicates for us. It's just hard to say.
But it's a good trend though, at least
It's on
from
the way
0
back
to
up.
28%. So
Yep,
that's a
yep.
good trend though.
Corey's got some great slides that show the people who were successful and what
Yeah.
they've done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they've got some good learning out.
And every district, you know, is unique. So does it resonate with people and does it meet the needs? And is it, you know,
Yep.
how supportive are they? And are they tired of taxes or, you know? it's just
And
hard to say.
not,
Who's
I know that we beat, I've definitely beat this drum, but this is a completely different bond
Yes.
or capital levy, whatever we want to call it. I think the capital levy is very sneaky, or the construction levy. I think it's a very sneaky way to try and get those passed. But it's just so different than anything we've ever done, because we've always said we don't have enough seats for students, and
Yeah.
that's a really easy sell. Well, not an easy sell. That's easier to understand. And me as a community member, that's very easy for me to understand. At this point, it's a completely different ask, which our neighbors have had to do because their buildings have been falling apart. We literally
Yeah.
have inequitable learning environments right now.
Right.
One thing on that
So-
message though is the growth is, at least what I've experienced is the people that are moving here in the new houses should pay for it. So there's also that.
Yep,
in that message.
Yep.
But on on a renovation of a building, that's not necessarily because of new growth. It
Right,
is-
so it's.
We have a
Right. It's just
60-year-old
different.
building.
It's just completely
need to-
different.
we
Yeah.
We
need to
could
start addressing
capitalize on
this.
that as well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to also just share with you some additional information that we didn't work on as a committee, but I think that they are kind of sensical next questions that
Can
you
I
might have.
ask
Sure.
one more about the bond passage rate? When I was looking at the bonds that have gone through, the number that have even been tried has been pretty low. So I'm not sure how great, I mean, we're seeing it increase and get better, but also like, do we really
I
know?
think that's most recently, like in the last few years, the number has declined, but back there when they're, in 2021, there was actually quite a few. There'd be like.
In
Tried and they
21,
failed.
And
yeah.
the years before, there was quite a few that.
Not surprising
And
in
I think
21.
that
No,
2010,
It's like,
It was a great time to get work done.
that 2010 to 2019, also everyone was growing pretty quickly. And so
Right.
a lot of those bonds were probably for growth.
Right.
And then there were ones for old aging facilities mixed in.
Is this national?
Tri-Cities
or-
has been successful and there's.
It's just state,
Washington.
Washington State.
growth.
Yeah, Judith asked a question. This is just Washington State schools bonds. Is that table? So additional information that I think is helpful as you guys consider these things is what does a potential middle school look like if SMS gets reboundaried and SES then goes to Chief Canum instead of Timber Ridge? So what I've shown at the top row is what the current enrollment is at those 3 middle schools. And then based on our kind of workflow, if we went with all 3, we had initially said we would start on the elementaries and then do the middle school last, which doesn't have to be that, but that's how I use this. So our current, if we said that middle school could be scheduled to come online in 2030, 2031, that would mean our current kinder through 2nd graders would be 6th through 8th at that time. So that first line underneath is what the projected enrollment would be if we just rolled up our current kinders through 2nd at each of those buildings in the feeder pattern. And you can see that Chief Canum drops to 400. If I use the K5 average for the buildings, just to give us a little bit more cushion or, allow for some variability in the grade levels, Chief Canum goes up to 421. The maybe more scary thing is if I only use kindergarten, Fall City's kindergarten was pretty low this year and SES's was lower. So that would only be 330 kids. So that is challenging. I did a model of staffing at a middle school with 400 kids. And what that essentially means is for your core classes, you would have 1 teacher for every subject, for every grade. So that's not terrible. One of the probably constraints on that is in your math pathways by grade level. I don't know if you would have enough in each to populate. And so that could be where you either need to have some more staffing and kind of subsidize that staffing or make some different choices in your math pathways. It would reduce electives by a little bit. So Chief Canum right now has 6.4 FTE running their elective packet. With 400 kids, it would leave you with about 5.2. So they would need to reduce 1.2 elective teachers because of the 100 fewer students. So I asked Michelle to do some preliminary thinking on that, and it's kind of doable. But we have for example, we have a band and a choir teacher. We probably wouldn't have enough demand for them to both be there, and so the music teacher would probably have to teach band and choir. You wouldn't need 2.5 PE teachers because there wouldn't be there. So the student choice probably gets more constricted as you reduce your enrollment because there just isn't enough quantity in there to spread that demand out. So it wouldn't be that we wouldn't have all the electives. Michelle felt like she could probably do most of the electives that are currently offered, but it would look different. And so it might not be as much choice. It might not be as much frequency, but it would be doable. I guess when I tested it, it didn't totally say this is going to be terrible.
So is this thing, is Fall City have low enrollment as well? I don't remember.
At kindergarten.
It's going, okay, so that's.
Fall
where that
City's been
for-
going down a little
Okay.
bit. And again, we don't,
And we don't think we have any new builds, bigger,
There's
anything
some
that's gonna
coming
be.
down there, but nothing.
Not
Nothing
nothing
significant.
North
More
Bend.
like North Bend where it's more replacing the population that's gone
Yeah.
through, right? It's
Sometimes
not
with more people,
increasing-
but yeah.
Yeah, it's not
One thing I
increasing
will-
the student population, it's just replacing.
We've had experience of Chief Keenum being extremely small before, and that was a different time with a different group of kids and everything else, but that was probably the most successful that school ever was.
Yeah, I think when I first got here in 2010, Chief Canham had 420 kids in it.
So we did some things like, adjusted the administration level and those type of things.
The
but-
counselor level, you'd have some adjustments to do. I guess my point is I tried to test at 400 and it doesn't like blow up in your
It's
face.
not a complete,
It's not,
got it.
It's not so bad.
there are some sacrifices and trade-offs, but it's not like we absolutely can't do that.
And possibly some benefits knowing that we've done it before. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Potentially.
who knows? Yeah.
And
At
Ryan-
330, like that, you
that's-
probably start losing some electives.
Do we have an
Ryan.
idea of what the capacity would be at the new Snoqualmie Middle School?
The cost that we estimated was to absorb Timber Ridge and Cascade View. I think it was 750 students was what Matt had kind of worked out. So maybe that cost comes down a little bit, but I think as you look at that, you're building for a future, and we're population will continue to grow. It's just the timing. So I don't know that we would shrink the middle school, but maybe it would be for 700 instead of 750.
How many do we have
Yeah.
again for the total population?
Currently,
495, 555, and 522.
yeah,
at
so
them.
about 1,500.
I guess I've always been assuming that the boom at Timber Ridge would eventually be mitigated by a boundary change. And
Certainly
so
could.
that would shift some of this around and,
It's just not real clean. It's just
Mhm.
who.
right.
Yeah, 'cause then
Who's
they're
gonna
gonna-
be there?
But that
Transportation.
would, right.
Because it's
that would-
Cascade View
right.
versus moving Cascade View students down to SES.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
both of those would feed the same middle school
Did
anyway.
we not have people?
SES
going
has
to-
areas up the parkway that
That still go
are
down there.
boundaried.
Yep.
So
No, I was thinking that we had some in Snoqualmie that go to Fall City.
Timber Ridge goes to Chief Canham right now.
Yep.
Timber Ridge and Fall City are the feeders.
But
Not the
new-
feeder,
Oh.
the kids,
The kids who live in.
kids who live up in that area or just anywhere on the ridge. I thought we had some that were still going to Timber Ridge.
Sorry.
I
say-
haven't looked at the map in a
Say
while.
that again. What I'm.
I thought we had elementary students who live on the ridge who were still going to
Twin Falls City.
Twin
To Falls
Falls.
City.
No, well,
Fall City.
elementary,
Fall
Fall
City.
City Elementary.
No.
Only by
No.
choice.
Yeah,
only
the
by
there.
choice.
Okay,
So
Okay.
Fall City Elementary is all Fall City now.
right.
SES is downtown Snoqualmie with a little bit up the parkway, kind of up to Ironwood,
Right.
and kind of halfway up the parkway before
Right.
you get to Fairway. Those
I-
those all go to
Part-
SES.
part of
Knew
Timber
those, I
Ridge
just
goes
thought
to
we
the
had
down
like
there.
some, yeah.
Part of that.
Yeah,
build.
but besides that lower down parkway, the rest of all the kids that live at Snoqualmie Ridge
Right.
go to either Timber Ridge or Cascade View. And so
Right.
our boundary changes have swapped between Timber Ridge and Cascade View,
Well,
which I
and
mean,
we
okay,
could,
some of them multiple times back
Yeah,
and forth, but
Mm-hmm.
it stinks.
But I think your point being there, is there a potential for a boundary?
and not
adjustment?
just between those two, but shifting so that it's more,
More at SES or,
Yeah.
yeah.
You
It's not
could,
good.
I mean, again, a rebuilt SMS at 530, if you're gonna move 40 kids down there to get, which is better, one school with 400 or two at 450,
so when I think about the question of where we have kids and where they could potentially be, I'm thinking about what does impact services. And so we have schools that can do stuff because they have too many kids. And we have schools that can't do things because they have too few. So to me, it's like, okay, let's balance that out.
Yeah.
So that we have,
Or you go to an equity rather than a equal-based staffing model,
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
which is
Which
expensive.
costly.
There's some other options, right? Like maybe parent partnership middle school goes down to Chief Canham, just like kind of Two Rivers is within the Mount Si High School, but they have an area. And then maybe that gives you some opportunities for some synergy with your elective teachers can can, you know, so there's opportunities. I think it's just, that's a question we'll have to answer. And I think a middle school of 400 is challenging when, you know, we've got districts in the area that are looking at closing schools because they have 300 kids in them. And so
And
getting there.
what's the max that Chief Canum and Twin Falls have had when it was just the two?
I think they were above 700,
That's what I was thinking too.
750.
That was
And so
up-
if,
it was a
so
lot
that
of
would
students.
do that again, if we
Well,
split and
we
had
would
two.
build it for that. You know, under this model, currently, the biggest Timber Ridge and Cascade View would populate would be 575, which is 20 away from what Twin Falls is right now.
So the good news is this is a chance to think outside of the box as well.
Maybe.
Maybe.
And depending on, you know, right size it, you know, you could build a middle school that doesn't have portables and hopefully would have enough capacity. Now, I'll say that as soon as you build a school, then everybody
Yeah,
moves
we're
there.
always gonna have a portable.
So
Right.
new middle school, we're moving there, you know, like we're buying there if our kids are in middle school. So you always plan for the best. And then, you know, Timber Ridge, we were like, we're going to take Cascade View and all Cascade View's portables and add 2 more classrooms. And it's just going to be so big. And then you open and an extra 100 kids show up. It's like, I guess we're adding portables. Like, anyway, so.
Yeah.
And then the community kind of matures a little bit and it settles down, just like Cascade View has settled down from where its heights. But something to be aware of, that middle school would be smaller and could have some budgetary
way
challenges.
smaller.
Yeah. On the timeline again, we want to just kind of get you thinking about the time needed to run a bond. It's a lot of work. It's a political capital. It takes a lot of time and energy on your part as well as on administration's part to run that. And so we want to just kind of lay out for you what we think kind of the minimum timeline needs to be. So we think 2 months for the board to work on building a bond package. You know, sure, these are the buildings we want to go after. We need some time to say, are we going to add any other items to go out to kind of knock off like we did in 2015? What other needs would we want to maybe try to address in that, since it's hard to go out for a bond? We've heard that survey to the community, a statistical survey to kind of, before we spend a lot of money and time to gauge that, is helpful. It was very helpful for the 2015. Will it be helpful now? You know, do people answer their phones? I don't know, but I did some work on that. It costs about $30,000 to run the survey. And they say it's about a 10-week turnaround. I'm calling it 3 months just because we're not as efficient as that. That timeline kind of looks like this, where they've, you know, a couple weeks to build it, couple weeks to run it, a couple weeks to give the report. And so you've got to kind of plan for that if that is an important information point on a kind of a go, no go.
Ryan, how close do we need to, would we need to, if we were going to do that survey, would we want to hone in on, like, if we say, hey, we only want to do 2 buildings right now, we just don't feel like the community's ready to do 3 buildings, and that's just too much to, would we need to get to that point for that survey? Or could we do a survey where we were testing the fact, all 3 of them, because we do feel like all 3 of them need to be done.
One question, would you be more favor if there was an elementary and a
Well,
middle, or would you be
And
in
the
favor
reasoning
if there was
behind it,
just-
right?
yeah.
Where some of this is not just the survey, but you're already marketing it, right? You're already promoting it. So we'd have to be careful how we're asking the questions, because we're actively going to be marketing it and promoting it.
And I think you could do it either way.
Okay.
If you wanted to just go out and have them test options, I think they could develop a survey for that.
Yep.
The other option is if the board is coalesced on something, let's tell the people that we've done the work, the board is coalesced on this, and we want to know your input. What's your feedback? And you might get the same, they will still build it in a question
we'll still
bank
get
that
the
they'll
same
be able to
feedback on
say,
it. Yep.
this component didn't test as well as that component,
Yep.
and you would then have the opportunity. So I think they would probably say, and we could have them come and present to the board. They would probably say it's better to run a survey with a plan in place than just an open-ended, do you like these projects?
And it's more so, I mean, going back to the high school survey, that was very specific, right? On honing in what people desired. And we gave them enough options. There weren't so many options that it was like totally open-ended, but we did hone it in quite a bit, where they were able to give us some really, really important feedback for us to understand if the bond's going to pass or not.
Yeah.
And more importantly, is this something that our community wants to spend money on? So I think it's that balance of, we don't want to package something up where they're gonna go, oh, hell no, versus giving them some options where we're able to get some good
Yeah.
feedback. So that's where which I know that they are experts and they would be able to help us guide that. I guess I'm just trying to think about the next steps, and it's hard for me to say, okay, this building is a clear winner, we gotta go after this one, and then we'll hit the other two. It's hard for me to choose one
Yeah.
over the
Well,
others.
and if you think about, if the middle school is one that you all agree about, then are you pitting one elementary school versus another elementary
Well,
school that are very similar?
Or different communities, because
Yeah,
I
different
mean, the
communities.
good thing about these three,
Why
which
this one,
again,
not that one?
this
and-
was not a benefit, but this wasn't one of that we actually measured, but we're actually addressing all three of
All
our
th- all
larger communities,
communities,
which
yeah.
is,
Everybody's getting something, so
which,
that's
and it's
great.
not because, that's not the reason why they were chosen. We used the matrix, which
Yep.
before COVID, I pushed for you to do. And it's not, some of it is qualitative, but there's some quantitative data in that as well to make it really clear. So I don't know, that's where I'm struggling, and that's more of I'm thinking out loud is,
Yeah.
I don't know how I personally could say we're going after, unless we had a plan on what if we did this one first, which we already kind of had gone through, and be very thoughtful around things like boundary changes and what would it look like and what is the enrollment, which you've done. I'm just struggling what the next steps are, because I think we need to do a survey.
Yeah.
I'm fearful, given the bond passage rate, talking to other districts, I am fearful that we will not pass a bond on the first time, which we haven't in the past, quite frankly, and it's a
Average
norm.
of 3 runs.
But
before
it's gonna be an average of 3 runs, so as long as we understand that, and maybe we run it once and we learn something beyond the survey. So although we don't wanna run a bond thinking we're not gonna pass.
Yeah.
We probably should be thinking, if we're gonna run a bond, yes, we'll learn what we can from the survey, but keeping in our minds that there's a chance the first one may not pass. And so how best can we survey them?
And I
and put
think
the package
right,
together.
I mean, the point of that is the right bond will pass.
Yes.
We have to figure out what the right bond.
If it's at the right bond at the right time with the right people voting.
A lot of strategy that they use, a lot of strategy you use is you go for your bond in November, and then if it fails, you can go again in February, and then you can go again in
But
summer.
you have to get the feedback because
We
a
have
lot
to
of
get
times you're
feedback. We're not gonna
most of the times
keep
you're
running the
modifying
same
it from-
one.
Yeah.
That used to work, right? Just put the same thing on and people will actually vote this time. But
And they don't
I
realize it
think
that they
that we have,
promoted no
which is a good thing. We have very savvy voters now because of,
Yeah.
everyone's very skeptical and nobody has extra money laying around. So
That 60%, isn't it based on the last major election?
It's 60% of the vote, but you have to have enough votes to validate. So there's a separate ratio of the last November election. You have to have enough voter turnout to validate the thing. And I don't remember what the benchmark is, but we typically have enough to
we
validate.
normally are
Yeah,
well above
yeah,
that.
The biggest worry is if you're running on a February right after a November election, because that's where most people come out.
We'll
But we
have
have pretty good voter turnout.
voter
so I
exhaustion.
don't think we've ever been at risk of not validating.
Well, and isn't with mail-in votes as well, I think that is actually quite
Much easier.
improved because you don't need to go anywhere.
So if we have 1 or 2 months to kind of finalize a bond package and about a 3-month window to do a survey, and then 1 or 2 months to take the results of that survey and decide whether we're gonna make some tweaks or not. And then you need, oh, we missed a T on that, sorry, community engagement. Probably 6 months is really the
It'd be
minimum
hard
you
to flip
want
it to
for a
February unless
community.
we were just gonna rerun the
You
same
know,
bond.
so you could run it shorter, but again, like, based on what this package could look like, I think you want as much time as you can get. So I think if you're pushing hard, a year is really aggressive. But somewhere between a year and 18 months.
I want to take the time that it needs to do it well
Yep.
and to do the right package. At the same time, the data I looked at was really consistent that bonds pass in February. And I'm like,
Actually,
I don't wanna-
the highest, the percentage of success is in February, second highest is in November,
Yeah.
then April, then August.
Which makes sense. April, everyone's on spring break. August, everyone's gone for the summer. So all your parents are
Yep.
doing something else instead of checking their mail or something. So
So is
this
it-
can adjust a little bit. It depends on how, if the board coalesces around something, then we don't need 2 months to generate what that package looks like. But anyway, I think you need a lot of time to kind of really do the community education piece. We have to get a citizens committee together, get them up and running. So it's not a quick turnaround if
A
you.
minimum year up to 18 months. That's the range.
Yep.
So that's kind of the timeline. And the other kind of wrench in that is we have our levy renewals that we typically would run in February.
And that's both, right? EPO?
Yep.
EP,
Yep.
Funds, tech.
So you could do them all.
There's some strategy behind that
Is
because
there
then they
strategy?
understand that each levy is for something specific and the bond is
Yeah,
for
and that they're
something.
different.
And so if
Very
you
good
don't
point.
run them at the same time, they vote for one school thing at the November
voting for
election.
that, yeah.
And then they say, why is the district asking for money? I
More
just
money.
voted
I
for
just voted
something."
for you.
Because they don't know school finance.
And even
they
our
don't
staff, when
understand the
Ryan and I have been
differences.
doing the financial kind of roadshow lately, even the staff with, this money can only be used here and this, that, even they're.
So why we have
acknowledging
two,
of that.
Yeah.
yeah.
So we wanted to, that's kind of what we had worked on so far. We wanted to initiate a discussion, and what we wanted to start with on the discussion is first, let's go back through the information that I just shared and give you an opportunity to just kind of voice anything else that's come to mind that you think we should bring out. And then we'll kind of go through more of a thoughtful exercise to where you guys kind of, we'll give you some time to kind of, we've given you some prompts and give you some time to kind of write your ideas down. So first we wanted to just review what we have reviewed and make sure, is there any other questions or information that is helpful for you? So any questions on the CFAC recommendation, the three buildings, why the three buildings, those things? Everybody's good there? Okay, and then the tax rate or the financing piece, any questions?
Based on that.
Or discussion that you want to, that you feel like we need to okay, I'm seeing a lot of those. And then any questions on the timeline, anything that we didn't cover, any kind of lagging questions on that? And again, none of this is set in stone, it's
Yep.
just to help you make your decisions, anything there. Okay, I'm not seeing any anxious hands, so we'll keep going. So what we'd like to do is we've got three questions for you. You've got a piece of paper. The first one is, do you continue to support the proposed scope of the CFAC committee recommendation, the three projects? Or do you think there's adjustments needed to better align with current priorities or community needs? So that's one that we'll ask you to think about and jot your, and I think we'll probably do each question one at a time, and then you guys can kind of share. The next one then is, what's your readiness for a voting measure to improve the facilities? So kind of the timing question. One is the scope. First one is kind of, is the scope right? Is it time to test the scope with a survey, kind of a question? Second question is the timing. What would be your preferred timing as a board member? And then the third question, kind of what are the next steps that we need to take to continue the process, to take a timeout, to get more information, to look at other those types of things after we kind of answer the first two. Does that make sense? So we'd like to just give you a few minutes to look at the first question and kind of jot down your thoughts.
And just to check with you, of course, as we differentiate for kids, if you need it, if you don't, and you're ready to move, we can do that as well.
Yep.
We can go question by question.
Well, President
Thanks,
Johnson,
Dan.
you kind of stated the complete confidence in what the plan presented with the three schools and the three communities. And I have to say, having visited each one, I also agree that they are the highest priority and that I think the plan was well put together. I like that we had a scoring matrix that identified the schools clearly as the ones that most needed improvements. So I am good with the plan and how it's presented. My next step is making sure we get construction costs down as far as possible so we can be wise with the taxpayers' money.
So based on question number one, I think Gary, I just heard what you say, you're comfortable with the recommendation. Does the rest of the board need time, or are we ready?
No, we don't, and let's remember, we do not make
We're
decisions.
not making decisions.
We're
Just a
just
discussion.
Just a
discussing.
discussion.
I'm comfortable.
So we
I'm
can
no
change our
decision.
minds
Yes.
with more information.
Yes.
Oh,
It's not
absolutely.
action, it's just
Yes.
we're now taking a pulse
Yeah.
to understand if we are ready to move on to the next question or if we need to work more on the first question.
And I think I already stated mine, but yeah, I mean, and I was on the CFAC. So if I didn't agree with it,
Yeah.
there's something might be wrong. but-
We're a little stacked with people
Well,
who
that was
are
a long time
part of
ago,
that.
though.
It was a
too. So-
really
and
long
things
time
have kind
ago.
of
And I was the
changed.
first one that said, we need to put this on halt because there's no way we're gonna put a bond out right now. But it is revisiting it, and I really very much appreciate all of the updates of what's changed as well. I don't see anything that changes our recommendations, which we went through a lot of work. I mean, you were on that as well,
And I think
as a
Judith was
community
too.
member. And when
Were
we
you?
did
No,
that
you weren't?
for multiple years, and then
Yeah.
we kept asking for more data. Carolyn was on it as well, and so was Joy. We kept asking for more data, more data. So even before COVID happened, it was almost a year and a half, maybe even longer.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of thought put into it. I would think, if anything, with some of the new information, anything that's changed since then, if anything, it reinforces the fact that if we're going to run a bond, it would be those 3 buildings. And I don't know, and with the plans, with the replacement or I don't know how there's nothing that would tell me that we could choose one over the other, to be completely frank, except for the big dollar bill.
Yep.
That it goes along with it.
That is
So,
a challenge.
And I
That's
think
all I,
if we chose to do a survey, we would know more if that
yes,
the
100%.
right
Yes.
project.
Yep, so
What she said.
I was gonna say what
Be
he
the
said. and then I
outlier.
add
I'm
more.
just gonna have to, I'm nervous about running all 3 on one bond. That is a really big ticket.
Yep.
Especially lining it up with the levy, which we cannot fail. And so I'll just voice my concern about
So-
that. I don't know how we would, I mean,
That's a good
choosing
question.
between
Yeah.
the elementary schools,
A
but
voter would be more concerned about tax rate or equity among communities.
I think
or
our
something to
voters are
that
gonna be
effect.
concerned about
The bill.
the bill.
Yeah, the
the
bill is
price.
very concerning.
And my priority is getting SMS moved and locked down.
Yeah. I will say the same
And
thing
so-
if I had to choose, but I feel like that's very selfish and personal for me because my kids went there and it was.
I think
So I think
would be
that I
helpful
feel
on
like that's more of a personal.
the survey is also helpful because
Yeah.
it might help us understand, do people share the same safety concerns? Because
Yeah.
one worry about an SMS alone is it's another Ridge school. And we heard very strongly in the committee that North Bend has felt like they haven't gotten much.
Yeah, I don't
gonna-
think we should only
So-
run SMS, just to be
so-
clear, but I would say an elementary and SMS.
And then we have competing, we're hearing that like Lake Washington is trying to take some
And like-
land from Riverview,
We're not
So-
hearing that they're actively trying to
do it.
draw land from Lake Washington
Any-
or Riverview. And if that happens, Issaquah will be next. So we need to think about Fall City differently than we may have.
So that might be an attracting thing to have them want to stay because they don't feel like they're also kind of a cast off in the
Yep, but
priorities.
I agree 100%. The amount scares the crap out of me. Even thinking about a bond scares the crap out of me right now. But I don't know how, because I'm very data oriented and I'm based on facts. I don't know how we would choose one over the 3.
And I don't think you are.
That's
just
where I'm.
Ryan,
Unless the survey gives
See,
some information that
Ryan-
says
Yeah.
this one is
The
testing.
question was about
The
the
recommendation.
recommendation. Do we agree with the recommendation that these 3 facilities are needing the most attention?
If we were gonna run a bond, we're
If-
not saying we're
yeah,
gonna run a bond.
Of course.
Yeah.
So we're not making any choice between this version, that version, or this package versus that package.
Are these the
That is to be determined based on, based on what whoever we choose to consult with and also the survey.
Okay.
Gary,
It sounded like the other 2 board members were also saying
Sa-
that as well. I would certainly agree, these 3 that were recommended are definitely the top priorities,
Correct.
for sure.
I think we have,
I was just going to make the comment that when this was first presented, I think the elementary school cost was around 80 million.
Mhm.
And so if there are tariffs coming on wood
Oh,
products,
yep.
then it's going to go even higher than what
Yeah.
Ryan's estimating.
Yeah.
So that's also my fear is that, well, we waited, but as we wait, it's still going to increase.
Things are gonna increase.
or steel, Canadian steel sometimes,
Yeah.
although I think you have to use US steel. I could be wrong. Yeah, the tariffs could be interesting too.
so I
So-
think what we heard on the first question was that
Yes.
we are in agreement.
We are
Well,
in
not in
agreement.
agreement.
Well, we agree with the
Each
CFAC.
person has a-
Recommendation.
We are not
Voting.
voting.
We are comfortable with.
These are the 3
comfortable with.
buildings.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
We are aligned.
We're aligned with that
There you go,
recommendation.
aligned.
Yes,
There.
absolutely.
Great word.
I'm happy to see it on our next meeting.
So the next one.
Next question is timing. So I think we want to get a sense from you on, and I know that this isn't, it's not action, it's just, what is your urgency on this? What's your readiness to look at that, to start building something to survey on and spend $30,000 to kind of get more information on? Or
What month do we need to file for November's ballot?
the November ballot, I think the filing is July or August.
Can't do
So I think,
Yeah,
I think
there.
that's gonna be a hard turn.
I
But,
probably,
I mean,
yeah,
that's pretty tight.
I'll just say, I've been probably the most pessimistic of all of us to think that we can
Run about
successfully
it.
run about or even comfortable talking about it. But if what I would be comfortable with, so it's good, we're 12 months out probably. If we do all of the work that we need to do, including the survey, which is, that is a,
Unless you survey and the survey's giving you like 80% approval and you're like.
Right.
well,
so
and then
let's-
that
let's-
might be, but I'm saying that survey is a,
Get it while we can.
I guess what I'm saying is that survey step is a non-negotiable for me. Like we don't, I would not support going forward or vote for anything at all
Without-
unless we were doing the
It's a
survey.
great way to get a pulse for you guys.
Right, and so I would be, which I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would be ready for a voting measure to start the work. Not saying we're gonna run a bond in November, we're gonna run a bond in next February, but saying start the work. I think it's worth if we pull our package together and pull all the data that you're pulling in terms of enrollment, what would it look like from a boundary issue? So we have all of our ducks in a row, which I know you probably have most of it already done. But if we had that package ready, I would be comfortable spending 30 grand to go out and get that survey. I'm under the belief we're gonna have to do another survey that's my assumption.
be.
Maybe I'll be surprised, but I'm assuming that we're probably gonna need to do another survey based on that feedback. But not only do we need to understand, or for me to even feel comfortable about voting to put something on a ballot, would be feeling very comfortable. We've not only gotten input from our community, but we've promoted it in a completely different way that we've never done, honestly. It's always been we need seats. But we need feedback, not only from a comfortable perspective, but the community needs to give feedback. Because if it's we are not ready for this, okay, got it. We've got a package. We're probably gonna need to put this on hold and maybe test. I know that there's always an option to go out with one building. I'll say it again. I don't know how we choose that unless the survey comes back and it is resounding. Who knows? But I would be, and I can't believe I'm saying that because I've literally been so pessimistic with Dan, like there's no way we're running a
And
bond, but
one challenge
I
on,
would be comfortable starting it with putting the package together and working on a survey.
one challenge on the survey, if I remember right, when I talked with them, they feel like they need 200 to 250 per group, or maybe it's 70. They have a sample size that they need to get. And I think they weren't sure if they'd be able to get a sample size for Falls City as a community, because they weren't sure that, the cost to get that many respondents. And so what we could do is I could have, give us some more information, have you guys hear it. But it was about 30,000 with, I think, 200 responses or 250 responses.
Yeah, and I mean, you also pollute the respondents when you start going after some in some communities more so than other communities. So that's a little bit, sure they say, because they want to be statistically
Sound.
accurate and sound, right, with their R value, but I don't,
But as a percentage of the
as
population.
the percentage of the
whole,
population,
it
I
should
don't,
be
I'm not as,
representative.
I know they're gonna wanna say it's a statistically backed and our values, off the charts, but I'm not as concerned with that, given, and I do, as long as we feel like Fall City's accurately represented. Cause I don't know how they could say 200 for each, because we have much
It wasn't
fewer.
200 for each, but they were talking, it was a couple months ago when I
Yep.
called. So, they have a minimum group. And so you've
Yes.
got to decide kind of like, what is your target
Right.
area? So they know where to get those minimum groups to be able to kind of feel like it's a representative sample.
We have 3 communities, right? So I
Yep.
think,
But I think they had a hard time with getting enough out of the Fall City. They were concerned that it was
But it'll take
spread out.
I think it takes North Bend and Snoqualmie to vote for that anyway.
Yes, that's actually a really.
Well,
good
they're the
point.
majority of your voters, so.
That's a
Anyway,
good point. Yeah.
I can try to schedule
Yeah.
maybe at the next board meeting or something and have them come and let you guys.
That
know
would be good, because
What does
it's,
this look like? How does
yeah.
that? And
do
kind
they
of
have the numbers? Do they have our demographics and the population
Yeah,
in each,
they
what
gave
we
me,
call
they
regions?
gave me a quote, and so we
Okay.
talked through that a couple months ago, just as I was kind of getting ready for this, but it's probably good for you guys to hear it
Yeah.
because you want to know how the data is done
And it's money. I mean,
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
30K.
Is there, so running more than one, I'm completely there with you because even though 30,000 is a lot, it's important that we're on the right track. That, because 30,000 compared to 400 million is,
Yeah.
let's just find out. And, but I also know that over the next year, we're gonna see how things are going. And so to set out a strict timeline obviously would not make any sense. We could see that this is very much the time to do it, or we could see, okay, this is not.
In terms of results from the survey and then saying, now what do we do?
Right.
Yeah.
And then even some other shifting. But for me, I just keep thinking about how much the cost has gone up
Yep.
since we started talking about it. And there's not an indication yet that that's going to change a ton.
No, it's not going to.
And so I don't want to make things take longer than they need to.
Yep, I think we are all in agreement to
Yeah.
hear from the DA Davidson, is it? Or somebody else?
the survey company.
The survey company.
Yeah.
To understand how do we get the feedback from the community and then
So,
we can.
Ryan, what would that look like? Like at the next board meeting, would there be an action item that we approved to move forward with exploring the bond that was?
Let me talk with the survey company and see if they're available. It would be nice to have them kind of present and say, this is how we go about collecting the data, this, in an era, one of the questions I had for them was, in an era where nobody answers their phone,
Yeah, can you text or
how
can
do you get the information? And so they can talk about their methodology
Right.
and what the results would tell you. And then they have kind of a range of costs depending on how many questions you want to ask,
Yep.
like how long is the call, and what's your sample size? And so it was $27,000 to $30,000 based on what they were recommending.
So is this survey going to be done over a phone call or can it be done on regular stuff? Or both?
I believe it is phones.
I think we need to ask them though, because maybe there's another company, I mean, with
It's
tech
just
nowadays.
So many,
I mean,
so many people
Yeah.
text now
Yeah.
with surveys,
So I believe it's
especially
still
if it
phones.
Oh,
was
really?
legit
That-
saying it was
that-
for us.
I don't,
I don't know that.
how do you get statistical validity?
I don't answer
Because
any
the
phone
people
call
who
if
are
it's
going to answer
I
their
have a
phone
phone.
and talk to you are
A landline.
going to be
Cell
a small
phone.
group.
I'll double check. I had reached out to some other companies that looked like they had done surveys for school districts and they did not respond.
Right.
So I only had the one that we used the last time and they've done it.
We'll
They're
do
still
that.
doing it.
We'll do that work. We need to
So
do that work.
It
because-
wasn't like I was
I don't
asking them
answer my
something
phone
that
if I
they've
don't know
never
who it
done
is.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, we're doing this all the time for schools.
Yeah.
So their methodology it is what it is,
Yep.
you know.
Right.
We can reach most of the parents through Parent Square.
But we need more than our parents.
No, I'm
That's
just,
the only
of course,
families, so,
community is
yeah.
there and all that stuff, but
And is there value in it being an independent party that's collecting the data?
There is value in
instead
it.
of us
Our
collecting a
percentage is gonna be
survey?
higher with parents.
and
oh,
so-
most definitely, most
Yeah.
definitely.
So I'll see if they're available for a kind of,
If they're still in business, they have to have some solution for getting
I would-
feedback.
I would think so.
You would hope.
but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was phone calls because they have people asking the questions and to make sure they're
Are they
talking to
paying
people.
people?
No, they're paying people to collect it.
But they're
right?
not paying people for the surveys.
No. So those are good questions, I think, to ask. I asked them and, it wasn't just all online, but I hadn't found.
It can be hybrid, I'm not
Yeah,
saying with a.
I'm wondering if it's hybrid as well,
Yeah.
but yeah,
If they
okay.
can call you on your cell, why can't they text you on your cell?
Yeah, I think from what I'm hearing, it's the personal
Oh,
ask from the
Maybe.
live ask of
yeah,
the question.
By your response, they ask you something next.
Right.
yeah.
Who-
that's
but
true.
Who
But you could
answers
do
their
that
phone if
online.
they don't know
You
who
could
I
it
think
is?
it's great. I would prefer that we ask them and.
Do you want us to just keep asking you the question? How did it happen?
Can you
How
change
did
your
it
answer?
happen? I don't know.
If we want to just do an online survey, we just do an online survey. So anyway,
Cool. Awesome.
I just tried to get the cost and know that they do it, and here's kind of what they
Cool.
would say they're doing. So it's worth,
Cool.
if that's
So is
kind of
That's
next
the next
step.
Steps then is you talking to the survey company and then reporting,
Bringing them
seeing
in.
if they can come to the next board meeting.
Yeah, and they would, I think they'd be able to tell us, one question is also, do we want to test the 3?
Yeah.
Do we want to test any other things?
Right.
The other asset improvements? It's always nice to get some of those things done in a bond, but the price tag is also growing. And so, do we start with the 3 and keep it focused on the 3 and see how that tests and then decide if there's room for some other things or not?
Yeah, as long as you're transparent.
You
about
could
it.
always run a levy for those other things. A transportation facility might be a good levy thing to do or something, but
Yep.
because I also don't want to have so much on there that it's so much,
confusing and, yeah.
if we really want to hone in on
Say no.
these 3 are big
I don't, it's
asks.
not, I don't understand it,
Yeah.
yeah.
This
Or,
is- this is
understanding
all about
portables,
kids.
safety, like what are the rationale that resonates with people?
Yep.
Since it is a different ask than we're out of room, will you support a bond,
And I know that we are very intentional about safety in all of our schools.
Yes.
But we do have schools that are more vulnerable in ways that are not what you want.
Yep.
And we're addressing that in every way we can, but there are limitations to what can be done without that being a new building that just isn't constructed that way.
Yep, it's a very good point, and that's a fine line, because we don't want to promote the fact that we have unsafe schools,
Right.
but at the same time, we know that there are, and when you look at these 3, these are the 3 that we would pick and
Right.
go, if we're gonna improve 3 in terms of safety and all the other benefits, these are the 3. So, yeah, I'm always, just don't want to,
And is it enough
Well,
that
and-
folks are willing to
unsafe
pay
school, and we're
taxes
still
on it?
sending
No,
students to
fair.
it, so.
Well, and we know, and we
Is it
know
valuable
that,
enough for
like,
folks that they're willing to pay
we
increased
know
taxes
enough
for
that
it?
we're doing everything we can, and we've
Yes.
taken action at all
but
of
we
our
don't have any other
schools.
option.
But
Yeah,
that's,
we've done as much as
so,
we can.
so not saying, oh, it's terrible and we're doing nothing and we're ignoring, no, no.
Yep.
We are taking action,
Yes,
but
to
it takes
build
a lot
bond
more.
Package before
Yeah.
you go to the survey?
I
Before we
think-
do the survey?
I think what I'll do is I'll see if they can come to the next board meeting, if that's all right with Dan, and kind of just present with you guys what their methodology is. I can let them know that we've coalesced around these 3 recommendations, and then they can give a recommendation on what does
How
that
we go
survey
about
look
it.
like with
Okay.
that, and kind of help answer your questions on how to structure that.
The CPAC report is the start of that.
Yeah.
Because we,
And it also talks as to why these buildings were chosen in terms of
and then we can peel
equitable
it down
learning
from there.
environments and.
And so then that answers, I think, gives you a chance to discuss with them and gain comfort on their methodology. And then if we're still good, then we can start, they can start scheduling that while we work on what else do we need to do.
Yep.
in the meantime.
You can start calling people on the phone.
Yeah, sign me up. I'll convince everybody.
Yes. Yeah, good, Judith.
Any other next
This
steps
is just
or
this November?
information
They already have the-
that
Mhm.
you guys feel like we need to get you?
I think that's
No,
the
but
first
once
thing.
we have our
November,
vote
especially this
and
one with the
we need
presidential
to have
election,
Beth
'cause we
find a
don't-
new clip
everyone's
art.
voting.
When you go past this for
Yeah,
next
it
He's
gets a
year.
little
a
scary.
construction guy that basically
yeah.
keeps costing things going during
August,
concrete
September.
strikes and
When at the time
COVID.
comes.
He pre-ordered a bunch of stuff in advance that got
Wonder
here,
what
so we weren't
previous ones
impacted by
were, 'cause I
COVID
know
or
this
the
is-
Oh,
presidential
concrete
election, so it's
strike.
a little
Yeah.
funky. They throw
Right.
stuff on.
Saves us
Lucky
a lot of
the
money.
Outside high school that we finished it before COVID.
Yeah.
Or else we would have been screwed.
Yeah,
No,
so
we
yeah,
didn't.
February
I
is
mean,
when
they're
they end up
building out
passing.
there in their masks and whatnot for a while.
But like, yeah, I mean,
It's a
Touchy.
show.
Most
And
of
had
it
to
was
bring
done,
in
right?
groups of small
2021 was
small
a funky
groups
year,
with the
too,
masks.
yeah.
Yeah.
At the same time then, but
All right. Is the
Yeah,
board?
that's been pretty general, but.
President, motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
motion to adjourn at 8:06. Nothing to.
thank you, everybody.
You.
Thank you, very well
do you
organized.
get to turn in our papers?